Hey guys, what is up? We're back for the movie discussion Pocket Dimension, where time does not exist. The only thing that matters is film. That's Jay and I'm Cole. We've been off for a bit. Forces have conspired against us, but we're glad to be
We're
back and
back.
hopefully we're back. We'll hopefully get a rhythm going and get some shows in a row, which hasn't happened in a while. But yeah, so this one was originally scheduled for about the end of June, and we had to well not
Mhm.
cancel, we had to stop it. So this one's been sort of a long time in the making, and this is from 1976, Marathon Man, the Dustin Hoffman film. A film I think
Mhm.
it's a pretty famous film. It's one of the more known films from the 70s. A lot of people know it and have seen it, and it's one that I've before this had never actually seen. And it's
Mhm.
one of those movies where it's well known, so it's got a reputation. So you hear things about it and you read things about it. But as I watched it for the first time, I discovered that I had some misconceptions about it, and I'm not sure exactly where they came from. If it's something I just made a mistake on, or something I read, because I kind of got the wrong impression of the movie. I mean, the movie is not. It didn't completely take me off guard. It is sort of what it says on the tin. It's like a sort of thriller type movie
Mhm.
in the 70s, and you have like a Nazi war criminal in it. And it's called Marathon Man because our main character runs. Like I knew all that, but I think the impression I had of the movie was it was one of those sort of like race against the clock type movies, kind of like something
Mhm.
like Run Lola Run. So in my head, one way or another, I had it like that. I thought it was something like Dustin Hoffman was going to have to run, like
Mhm.
to rescue somebody or to get something, to stop something. And I mean, he does run, and it comes into it, but not in the way I thought. For some reason, yeah, I thought it was one of those like against the clock things. Like I thought maybe the bad guy would put him in a position where it's like you have this much time to blah blah blah. And I don't know if I'm just made that up or if it's like just me mixing it up with other movies or what. So when I actually watched the movie and it's as the plot starts to take shape, I realized that's not going to happen here. So it was kind of interesting to
Yeah.
me from that because sometimes there's movies that your whole life you don't see, but you feel like you know a lot about them, and then I see it and it's actually different from what I imagined.
The title, I think, is probably from why you think that, and this is based on a book which I'm not familiar with, but apparently Roy Scheider read the book, I think, on the set of Jaws when they were
Okay.
filming Jaws. He read it in one night, according to the trivia or whatever,
Yeah.
and then gave the book to, I'm guessing, the director, because I think he may have been on the set of Jaws. Well, not the director, but doing something on the set of Jaws.
Right. So
And
this is
eventually,
John Schleicher, or however you
right,
say his name,
who
who
I'm not
direct.
extremely familiar with.
Right, like I've heard of several of his movies, but haven't seen them. I mean,
Just
I
go look
saw
at
one of
it.
his last movies, 1996, Eye for an Eye, which is just a god awful terrible movie. Don't watch it. But I mean,
Uh-huh.
he did. But I mean, he'd worked with Dustin Hoffman before because he's the director of Midnight Cowboy, which
Right,
is one of the most.
right.
Which I know we talked about way a few years ago when we did talked about the New Hollywood movement because that's one of the big
Hmm.
movies of the New Hollywood movement. We didn't do it,
Hmm.
but we did do the other sort of big Dustin Hoffman one. We did
Graduate.
The Graduate. But John Schlesinger, so he had worked with him on Midnight Cowboy, and
Hmm.
Sunday Bloody Sunday is supposed to be really good. It's a British one.
I was gonna
It's
say it
got
sounds like a
Peter
horror
King.
film. I'm sure it's probably not though. Yeah,
It's
I don't
kind of
believe so.
like I mean, it's mostly just a drama, I guess is
Uh
the
huh.
best way to put it. But anyway, it's quite acclaimed. It's supposed to be really good. So it's one I've always wanted to see. And he did The Falcon and the Snowman, which was like some sort of like Cold War type of spy movie from the 80s. And
Hmm.
then after that I really don't know his movies. And it's just random chance that I happened to see Eye for an Eye a couple years ago, and it's just really bad and you shouldn't watch it. The Day of
Hmm.
the Locust is another title I heard. This is from the same era, 75. It's got Donald Sutherland, Karen Black,
Oh wow.
pretty big deal at the time. And it's another one that I know stuff about but haven't seen, but
I
sounds
haven't
like
seen
it's
it
worth
either.
watching. So the big ones are really Midnight Cowboy, Sunday Bloody Sunday. They're all in a row. Like Midnight Cowboy 69, Sunday Bloody Sunday 71, Day of the Locust 75, Marathon Man 76. They're all in a row, and they seem like his most well known and probably best received movies.
Yeah, he was really coming off some success when he made this then, because I mean,
Yeah,
hell, Midnight Cowboy was huge, right?
yeah, yeah. But in the 70s, he's definitely one of the most prominent directors. Like he'd be mentioned in the same breath as somebody like a Coppola or or
Mhm.
somebody like that. I don't know, George Lucas maybe. Um, even though he'd be, let's see how old he is. I know he's been dead for a while. He'd be a bit older than them. He'd be a bit older than sort of that wave of new Hollywood
So
directors.
he was some of the old
He'd
guard
be
basically coming in when the younger guys were coming. The I mean
Well,
the
it seemed like as far as directing full, like it wasn't really until about the time in New Hollywood that he was directing feature length stuff. But he himself was older than those directors. Like
mhm.
a lot of them they were might even be in their 20s. Some of them were so young when they started. But for Far From the Madding Crowd, which is 67, Schlesinger would have been he would have been about 40, 41. So so that's in 67. So, so he would have been into his 40s in the 70s, which isn't old, but would make him a bit older than sort of that
Right.
generation coming up. But
Those
they were still
guys were
contemporaries.
they were all like fresh out of film school, the ones that went.
Yeah. Yeah. See, he was different from them in that he didn't,
Mhm.
he was older and didn't, and he was not, and he, I mean, there were British people, and obviously he's British. So, but yes, he made some fairly big films in the 70s, and this is certainly amongst them. So, I mean, it was long overdue to watch this movie. But yeah, when I finally watching it, I realized that I had some misconceptions about it that had built up one way or another. He actually did win Best Director for Midnight Cowboy. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
because Midnight Cowboy was, as you said, it was huge. That would obviously really uh, made him famous.
Yeah, it's a good film
But
too. I
yeah,
felt
like
like
you
it
said,
was
Marathon.
kind of on the nose for us to do during that, little too conspicuous, I think, for us to do during our New Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean there were ones like that, and we brought up a few times like Bonnie and Clyde. Like we knew we were going to mention them, but
Yeah,
it seemed like we
yeah.
didn't have to do them. We would do some of the films that came up around the same time. I'm
Mhm.
mostly happy with the films we chose.
Yeah.
Speaking of, actually, not too long ago, where was I? Oh, I guess it must have been when I was back in Sydney. On one of the channels, the movie Blow Up came on, and I was watching some of
Oh,
it.
yeah.
That's probably our
It's a good
worst
one.
episode because I was completely plagued with horrible like lag and stuff. Like it's almost unwatchable, which is too bad because the movie's good, but
Mhm.
uh, it's hard for me to recommend our Blow Up episode from the new Hollywood thing because it's kind of a mess as far as from a technical standpoint goes. But yes, this is based on the novel of the same name by William Goldman. And I have to say too, being like a 70s thriller, a lot of those movies have like a same sort of look and feel, including ones we've done on here. Like more recently for the British crime thing, we did Day of the Jackal, and
Mhm.
also starring Roy Scheider as part of the new Hollywood thing when we were getting towards the end of it. To pick one of the more off the beaten path, we did the lesser known William Friedkin movie, Sorcerer.
Mhm.
I feel like all those movies have like the sort of same look and feel. They really,
It's
even though they're directed by different people, they just have a very uniform look to them. They all remind me of each other, and I mean, you could just
yeah,
basically say, "Well, it's the '70s." I guess is the simple answer.
what's the Friedkin Chase movie? I always forget the title. Really popular movie.
The freaking what?
Gosh.
Sorry.
A chase movie, where it's basically just a lot of car chases.
Oh,
Um,
right. Hold on, I have got that. William
I
Friedkin's
always forget
hilarious, by the way.
the damn title.
I
Anyway,
uh,
that one really is unique. I mean, I just love the feel of Marathon Man in that it's so 70s. It's such a time capsule of a movie,
mm,
when he's, when Dustin Hoffman's around in the streets. And I just love that. I know it was like really bad crime and stuff in New York, but I mean, it was really cool to see the sights around that time.
yeah. Um, do you just mean French Connection? Because obviously that's
French
his big
Connection, yeah.
famous one. Yeah, French
Hmm.
Connection '71.
I always forget the title of that for some reason.
Yeah, like he did French Connection and then followed it up with Exorcist, which is considered one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and really the one that elevated the genre, right? Because like before Exorcist, horror was not something that was taken seriously. It's still mostly
Right.
not taken seriously, but at least it still can be, and a lot of it's because of The Exorcist, right? The Exorcist is just considered not just a good horror movie, but a good movie,
Mhm.
period. So, but I was gonna say I hadn't known until probably a few years ago when we did do the Friedkin movie Sorcerer, and I started like, have you seen him do interviews and stuff? He's fucking hilarious, man.
Yeah.
He's so funny. Like he's always like he's just a very candid guy and
Yeah.
like he'll just say what's on his mind. Like he's not one of those people that only will like talk about like he's criticizing people or and talking about
Right.
that. I saw just the other day. I saw somebody just as part of a tweet. It was a part where he's talking to Nicholas Winding Refn or whatever, and they're having a conversation as both like auteurs and stuff. But the difference is that's the way
Mhm.
Refn sees himself. Friedkin
Right.
doesn't see it, buy into that bullshit. So he's basically criticizing Refn for talking about it that way, including at one point Refn talks about his film, which we also covered on here, Drive. He himself calls it a masterpiece, and Friedkin's like, "Are you serious?"
Wow.
and
Yeah.
and then he says like, "Is like, is there something wrong with this guy? You think that's a masterpiece?" He's like films that have stood. He's like, what is that? 2011 films that have stood the test of time. That's a masterpiece. He's just like, he's like he goes what he says. He goes like Space Odyssey 2001 is from 1968, and that still holds up and it's talked about. It's like you think Drive's still going to be talked about? He basically laughs at him. It's pretty darn funny. So,
I mean, I don't
but I've seen
disagree with Refn in that, but I mean, saying that about your own work is pretty,
yeah,
pretty pretentious thing to do.
I think so. Yeah, so you really like Friedkin because,
That's
as we
funny.
said, he was part of that sort of auteur generation, but he did not. That's not the way he
Mhm.
viewed it. Like, obviously, I'm sure on some level thought he was making art, but he wasn't the type of guy that would look at things that way, which is pretty funny. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's pretty funny. I've enjoyed. I've actually since then just like on purpose like looked up interviews with him because he's very candid and just says what's on his mind, and it's really quite funny. But yeah, I really like Friedkin. He's an interesting guy. Um, I mean, he did a documentary in 2017, which is pretty interesting because you think he would have been long retired, and he did a pretty cool thriller in 2003 when he still would have been quite a bit older, The Hunted, with
Uh-huh.
Tommy Lee Jones and I think Benicio del Toro. I like that movie a lot.
He did a documentary about like exorcism at one point, or a faux documentary. I don't know if it was supposed to be taken seriously, but
Yeah.
father,
One thing that
something.
separated him is that his first like several movies were like that's how he started. His first movies were documentaries before he moved on to like feature length stuff or feature length fiction or whatever you want to call it. So that makes him a bit
Mhm.
different. But anyway, I know we are not actually talking about Friedkin on this one. We
Yeah, I
are
know. I
talking
just
about
realized that.
we are talking about John Schlesinger, or however you say it, but British guy. But the other thing is, of course, this movie's known for is it's Sir Laurence Olivier, right? It's the bad guy.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it's
mean,
Laurence
he
Olivier.
apparently was like riddled with cancer during this and thought he was going to die, but
Yeah.
made a
He's like
made a recovery.
I've seen quite a few Laurence Olivier movies
Hmm.
going all the way back to the 40s. Like I'm pretty familiar with the guy. He's like unrecognizable in this
Yeah,
movie. The way he
absolutely.
looks, the way he talks, like he just disappears into this role. Like
Yeah.
it's amazing. And what's funny too is I've talked about this before. Another thing that came up around the same time in the New Hollywood era, not just directing styles but acting styles, is where you get the rise of like Brando and these people doing like method stuff.
Right.
And in this movie, I don't know if he always does method stuff, but for this movie, I guess Hoffman was fairly method, and
Hmm.
basically Olivier just like laughed at him for it and
Yeah.
said it was stupid. He's like, I don't understand what you younger actors think you're doing. It's like the whole thing is called acting. So if you
Have
want
you
to act,
tried
act.
acting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
have you tried acting? Yeah, because the thing is, like, what is it? He like stayed up for several days to make himself more disheveled and tired and things like that.
That's
And,
the
I mean,
story. I think Hoffman kind of discredited it later on, saying that he
uh,
was basically just partying really hard and was
possibly.
just up because of, cocaine, I guess, basically is what he was saying.
Fair enough. But
But
yeah, so and I guess the other thing too is since he's such a big actor and since the villain, like I remember he's one of the top villains on the AFI's list of villains and stuff. I thought he'd get
mhm,
more screen time, and he doesn't get a lot. And I mean, I guess that's fine to sort of hold him in reserve for the important parts. But it's another thing that I sort of got wrong about the movie when I pictured it. I thought it would be
right.
more of like a cat and mouse game
Yeah.
between the bad guy and the good guy, and it really isn't that. It's like what, like he captures him once, and then he comes after him again, and then they have like a final confrontation at like
Well,
the dam or
you
whatever
don't
it is.
he doesn't actually get screen time till, I mean, like 30 minutes into the movie or so, because I think they initially did some test screenings. It didn't go well. a little too violent or
Mm.
graphic for the audience. So they cut out some of the scenes that had they had Olivier in it beforehand of some murders and stuff. So
Uh,
so
like I said,
they do add to some of that.
I don't mind introducing the villain a bit later, build some
Mm-hmm.
mystique up and things like that, and then you don't need to overuse anybody. But there's another case where I think like when you like Sorcerer is a bit different because Sorcerer was like several main characters. They all had like their opening, and then it shows how they got to this place, right? Sorcerer's got an opening where it's like a 10 minutes for each character showing where they are in the world, what they're doing, and how they all wound up
Mm-hmm.
there. So it's a little bit different. This movie has also sort of table setting for the setup in that you've
Right.
got um, just an introduction of our guy running. Okay, he's running, and then you see how these plots sort of intersect. You've got
Right.
the traffic accident with the Nazi's brother, who was the
Right.
one who was living in New York at the time and handling his affairs. He gets in the traffic accident with the Jewish man, fatal. And then, of course, we jump overseas to Paris to Roy Scheider, who at the time we do not know is his brother, right?
Right.
So I have no problem with this. I just feel like maybe a lot of modern audiences would, right? I feel like they'd lose
It
patience. They'd be like, "Who are these people?" They want to know right off, like what the connection is, and they want more explanation. I'm like, I appreciate that it takes its time in getting there, and eventually
yeah.
shows us, okay, he's his brother, and it's kind of an interesting coincidence because I mean, there's nothing wrong with coincidence in a movie. The coincidence being, fairly close to where his brother's living is
Mm-hmm.
where that guy dies, and he's the brother of the guy that
Mm-hmm.
Scheider, who is working as a courier for.
Well, yeah, he actually runs by, like he can
Yeah,
see the burning cars from where
yeah,
he's running in the park.
right.
But
And then, of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
everything
definitely.
comes together.
You're totally right about a modern audience not liking that aspect because now everything has to be laid out. You have to know what's happening from the get go, and yeah, I really like that aspect. It is kind of confusing. Like I learned a lot on my second viewing of this, which was for the show
Yeah.
that I didn't catch the first time around. Like I was, the plot was kind of, all over the place for me,
Yeah,
when
there's
I
still
first
stuff
watched
with the
it.
plot.
So,
There's still stuff with the plot I'm not great with, and like I said, I don't have any problem with the opening, but I do have problems with stuff later on because I do think some of the plot details are hard to pick up on.
hmm
Um,
hmm
so I'm not completely thrilled with the structure of the narrative because I feel like it does get a little muddy or confused in
hmm
places, and it might be easy to miss some details because there's some stuff that I still don't really know. Like, and I know some of it's intentionally vague. Like, okay, Roy Scheider is said to work for like the division. We never find out what
right,
that is. The idea is
right,
like it's some sort of like in between agency. It's like it's not the FBI, it's not the CIA, it's some sort of in between
and
agency that does secret shadowy things. Okay, but then there's like this string of like betrayals where it's hard to understand who's doing
right,
what. Like, was he gonna rip this guy off? He said he wasn't, and then the guy just kills him. And then
well,
there's the whole thing with his friend or boyfriend or whatever who did he betray him? Like I can't remember.
yeah, it's yeah, it is confusing there because I mean we're only hearing it from the guy who's going to betray everyone.
Yeah, so
So,
we
I
don't know if
mean, we
it's
don't even
true.
know if that's true. Yeah, we don't know what's true. We just can assume it's some government organization, but that may not even be true. So that's kind of left out in the open because, well, full spoilers here, guys. By the way, that's how we
Yeah,
do things over here. But
right.
see, I was like unsure of whether or not because I mean, why would they be working for this Nazi diamond guy, right? I mean, why if they
Yeah,
were U.S. government? I mean,
yeah. Shouldn't they be trying to hunt him down?
something.
It's the
Not,
type of thing,
helping him find his diamonds and, get things in order here.
right? So at first, because it is a little confusing, because I think the first time I watched the movie, it eventually becomes apparent that this guy has couriers for him to like move
Mhm.
diamonds around and stuff like that. And I think what most people think is what I thought is that you think that okay, let's get the character's name straight here so I don't screw up. So Roy Scheider is Doc,
Doc.
right? So
Mhm.
you get the sense at first Doc is some American agent and he's tracking them. Is probably what you
Right.
think, right? He's
Right.
tracking them. He's tracking them as a way to find the Nazi. That's I think what
Right.
most people think. It's like he's part of some task force or something that's trying to hunt down this Nazi war criminal, and they've found out about the courier, so he's tracking them as a way. And then it turns out he's like one of them. He's one of the couriers.
Yeah, he knows.
And
they all know each other, and
they all know each
he
other.
even like punches him. Like when he first gets to the U.S., he punches the guy. So punches Laurence Olivier, whatever his German surname is in the movie.
So he's let's see here.
Scheißen.
Zell.
Schutzel.
He's Christian Zell. So he's Zell. But it's weird because he's got his friend Janeway, who he calls Janie, right? And we'll come back to that in a second, something about that. But anyway, and that's the other thing. That supposedly the government agency is like he's sort of like the head of it, or at least the field commander, right? Is Janie or Janeway. But then there's a part later where it's like he's actually a double agent who's gonna screw them all over just so he can because he's the one that turns Babe, our main character, Babe.
Right.
Interesting nicknames in this movie, but that's what Dustin Hoffman's name is, Babe, because he turns him over to Zell, right? Like he comes to him and the guy's pretending to be a cop at first, and it shows that he must have some government connections because he's able to waltz into a crime scene and take command of it with like local cops there, right? So he's got some sort of ID, some credentials that show to the cops that he's a high up guy. So as he's interviewing him, at first he just thinks he's an ordinary cop, but then he tells him like, "Do you know what your brother did?" Because the whole thing is he doesn't know what his brother does, right? And he says he worked.
I was thinking. Sorry, I was thinking those weren't cops at all. I thought it was all that whoever they are.
That's possible, right? He could have like they knew posing as cops. Okay, yeah, that might make more sense, really.
That's the
but
way
at the
I
same
understood
time,
it.
like wouldn't they still have to do something to keep local law enforcement out, though? I mean, it was a murder. I mean,
yeah. Again, it's just open ended. So
didn't Babe call the cops?
You would assume.
Show up, right?
I mean, we didn't know. We don't know who he called, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, his brother. He comes back to his apartment. His brother's there, stabbed. Says some cryptic shit and dies.
Yeah, he's stabbed by Chanel.
Yeah. I mean, it says here that like Zell. Don't take this at face value, but I mean, just looking at the synopsis here on Wikipedia, they refer to the people on the scene as actual cops. That doesn't necessarily mean they are. That doesn't mean they are. These things aren't always, but it refers to them as cops. So, in either case, whether they're all agents or there's cops, in any case, Doc has some sort of pull, right? He has some sort of pull so that he can do this. But the thing is, like, and he sort of says, like, I'm going to use you as bait so I can catch this guy. But then instead, they do a fake escape where he thinks he's going to get away, and it's all rigged, with blanks and everything. Like it seems like, oh, Janeway's going to help him, and he kills these guys, but he actually returns them to Zell, which leads into the infamous torture scene. Which again is one of those things, whenever you hear about it, it gets built up, and you think it's going to be worse than it actually is. I mean, it would certainly really suck to really be in it, but it's not too bad to watch or anything, right? What's that say?
Protection. Okay, that's maybe a little inside information in German there. So that's what that division is, I'm assuming.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of more. There's definitely a lot of more subtle stuff like that I've missed that I'm still sort of piecing together as this movie goes. Like, I don't even know why Zell kills him. I mean, I understand sort of why Zell kills him. Zell's very paranoid, and that's why he kills him. Isn't it weird how that's shot, too? There's some interesting ways he's shot. Like, he's stabbed, but it's done in such a way we never see the knife. We just see him going close and him stagger away. We never actually see a knife, which is obviously...
Yeah, he has this knife that, like, pops out of his wrist that he uses quite a few times.
I guess maybe that's foreshadowing for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess you're right, because later on we do see it as he uses it to come after him. So I guess maybe that's foreshadowing. It's like, wow, I didn't even see a knife, but he stabbed him, and then you sort of do get a explanation how that happened.
The kill at the end, You're like, oh, where'd the knife come from? Oh, okay, it popped out on him when he was. Yeah, this will get there.
But so annoying, especially if you're from the perspective, and that's sort of how we follow. We mostly follow Babe's perspective. So I mean, his brother shows up suddenly dead, says some weird stuff and dies. The cops show up. Then suddenly who you think is the cop in charge starts telling you your brother's not who you think he was. Oh, and by the way, he worked with me. We were together. And he's just like, well, what did you guys do? And he's like, we provide. It's like, what kind of what kind of vague bullshit is this? You're telling you
Ah,
provide, you know.
from some
So,
cryptic government organization, sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Keeping it vague, you know, it was the days when, the double agents were everywhere and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
So,
double agents, triple agents,
yeah.
Cold War intrigue and things
Right.
like that, and that's why it is understandable to think, okay, this is why you might even have American agents knowingly helping a Nazi war criminal because it's part of some bigger picture type thing,
Right.
right? It's like yeah, we know he's a Nazi war criminal, but keeping him here, does something else in some other part of the world, something like that is how it goes. It's usually
Hmm.
how it is. Plus, I mean, as we would people would find out decades later, like the U.S. government worked with a lot of Nazi criminals, and including brought them over. Operation
Hmm.
Paperclip is not fictional; it's a real thing. So
Hmm.
if they had a use for them, they'd use them. But yeah, so this is sort of like you said, kind of the height of those days, and a lot of which the novels was written only a couple years earlier. I think it's 74. So I can't even
Hmm.
remember what happens to Jay. I didn't get that far in my second watch of the movie. What happens to Janeway?
He's killed by Babe in that house.
Oh, he's one of the ones that goes to the house?
Uh
Janeway?
huh.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the girlfriend he escapes. Babe escapes, finally makes it to a payphone, calls the girlfriend. What's her name? Elsa,
Elsa.
and says, let's meet up here. So she picks him up, takes him out to this random house, which he's
Yeah.
already kind
Which
of suspecting everyone at this point. So
yeah. And it turns
come to
out to
find
be
out,
like Zell's one of Zell's houses.
and she
And
turns out to be one of his couriers, which he kind of suspected at that point. Because I
right.
mean, the
It's
brother
a
even kind
trap.
of says that, at one point, the brother says she's up to
Well,
no good.
the brother outs her right away that she's not who she says she is, right? She's
Right,
saying she's Swiss and she's a history student. Here's the thing,
right.
I get again, this is a movie that doesn't show you a lot of things. A lot of things happen off screen and you sort of have to put them together. So the thing is, so at some point after the death of Zell's brother, there's this whole thing about killing the couriers, and Zell himself has to come out of his safe spot to New York himself to, I guess, secure the diamonds. That's his only choice. There's a government agency that is watching him and knows about him, and then you've got again various double crossing going on. People, maybe offing each other and betraying each other just to see if they can get the diamonds. Okay, fair enough. But at some point, Zell or the people that work with him become aware that Janeway has this brother Babe, and I guess they see him as like a possible weak point, or a possible way to get to him. So the idea is he has this girl that works for him, so he's going to use her as some sort of like honey trap, right? So
Right.
I have to say, sometimes when there's a twist in a movie, like you're so used to that sort of convention of storytelling that you don't really think about what led to it. Because I mean, think about what led to this. He is known to be a student at the university. He's at the university. He's in the library. She's in
Hmm.
the library. I get that. They plant her in the library where he'll run
Right.
into her like she's a student, and she does strike up the conversation. They're sitting at the table, and she asks him a question about Boss Tweed. But as soon as that happens, she reverts to in no way trying to interact with him or be near him. Like, did they do some sort of psych profile on this guy? Because here's what happens. I'll just take people through it very quickly. She asks about Boss Tweed. He tells her some stuff. Says he'll write it down for her. She says thank you, okay, and then she starts to shut off. And there's also a really weird line too, where she asks for the pencil, and he's like, "It's my pencil," so he won't give it to her, which is odd, right? Why is she
Yeah.
asking for his pencil? She's like, He's like, "No, it's mine." And then it's like she's like, okay, enough. She gets up and leaves. He stares at her really weird too. Like is the point he's really bad with women? Because he gives her the most awkward stare. He's like imagine somebody staring at you like that. So she gets up and leaves, which seems like in a normal situation
And
pretty
he.
normal. Like okay, get away with this shit. Then he steals one of her books on the pretense
Hmm.
that he can bring it back to her. Okay, she thanks him and says goodbye. Then
Right.
he goes to the door. She thanks him and says goodbye a
Right.
second time. He comes through the door and blabs and says, "I'll be a marathon runner." She thanks him and says goodbye a third time. And she says some stuff about him being bad with women and aren't you embarrassed? And he says, yes, yes. She
Right.
says, thank you, goodbye. We'll get through it. She says goodbye to him 5 times. And he
And
aggressively follows her across town and into an apartment and through doors until she finally says yes. If the whole point is to trap him, why on God's fucking green earth would she be that, distant, playing so hard to get? Like I said, did they do some sort of psych profile on this guy? Did they know that he doesn't take no for an answer and that's the best way to get him? Because you would think if she's there to trap him, she would be a lot more friendly and open with him,
Right.
and she wouldn't rebuff him over and over and
Right.
over again. So I don't know. I take issue with that. If it's just to throw the audience off so that later when it's revealed it was a trap, I
Yeah.
mean, I just try to think about the logistics of it. Like, what kind of actor is this woman?
I mean, I didn't think
What
that she was in on it because of that exactly what you're saying. Like, it's not like she was, open to him at all. Like, she was
she wasn't
shutting
there
him
batting
down
her
left and right.
eyelashes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like the one thing she does is she does initiate contact by asking him the question. But after that, all she does over and over again is to rebuff him and leave. And yet they're so certain that he's going to follow her and he's going to be, and they're right, I guess. And it all works
Yes,
out, and
it's
they
that.
start dating. And it is a little weird because then suddenly his brother comes to town, so he goes out with them. And I guess because his brother is in that kind of line of work, he's used to dealing with double agents and people
Mhm.
lying and stuff. He knows something's off about her, but he doesn't know what. He just knows
Yeah.
something, and he says enough to make her get up and leave. He traps her with this story. He's like, she's definitely German and all this stuff. And as soon as that comes through, we're thinking German. Okay, she probably does have some connection, this being a movie, and it turns out she does.
She's a courier as well.
Yeah, so she's a courier as well. But I mean, what does he have on these couriers? How can he get her to do so much for him? He's like, you have to go get this guy and strike up a relationship with him, and then you have to drag him out into my trap. Like, again, stuff like this isn't clearly defined, right? Like courier, like what
Mhm.
are your duties as a courier? Well, apparently it's do anything fucking Zell tells you to do, or possibly the agency, or whatever needs to be done, you do it. And by the way, they might just double cross you and kill you.
Well, according to her, all she did was delivered something somewhere and then brought money to Uruguay, I believe is what she says, or brought something to Uruguay. So that's according to her, which who knows what that's worth. And then, they get to the house. She takes him out to this house, which turns out to be the brother of Schwitz, or God damn it, what's his name? Schnell? No,
Oh,
Zell.
Zell.
I'll get it right eventually, maybe. That turns out to be his brother, and then he, keeps grilling her. She confesses, and he knows that they're coming there. She tells him that they're coming. They show up, whatever. He, talks to them for a bit. It's, tension, tension, tension. One of the guys tries to pull a gun. Babe shoots the two guys and then runs. And then Janeway chases after him and then shoots Elsa on the way
Yeah,
out.
that's what I forgot.
And then he shoots Janeway through the window.
Yeah,
So
it's weird
they're
because
all gone. Everyone's dead except
at one
for
point, Babe takes
Zell.
Elsa hostage himself, right? Like during
Yeah.
that during that during
Yeah.
that thing. At first, he takes her hostage because he
I mean,
kills
basically
them.
just a human shield, basically, is what he was using her as.
Yeah. What does it say? Janeway offers to let Babe kill Zell in revenge for Doc's death if Janeway can have the diamonds. Babe agrees, but as he leaves, but yeah. So that's the other thing. Like Janeway's so scuzzy because that seems like a pretty good deal, and then he tries to kill him anyway. Like he agreed to it. He's like, okay, that's like
Yeah.
he doesn't care about the diamonds, right? He's just upset about his brother being like. I think that's the other thing. Like, I guess everybody in that world is so used to greed and
Right.
betrayal. Like he can't trust him. Like he doesn't seem to believe him because we know that Babe doesn't give a shit about
Right.
the diamonds. He just wants to tries to kill him and gets himself killed in the process.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and don't forget that shit, what did I have? I had something else about Elsa. Now I've lost it. Oh yeah, don't forget that before Janeway, his brother, arrives, when he's in the process of dating her and now they're boyfriend and girlfriend, they get mugged. And I mean that's not just a random mugging, right? Those
Right.
must have been Zell's agents too. So
Right.
like
Yeah, I'd
did she
forgotten about
know
that. Yeah.
did she know that was gonna happen? Because like
That's a
they
good
rough her
question.
up a bit.
Yeah.
So there's things like that we don't know. Like we don't know. There's so much betrayal and stuff going on. Like we don't know who knew what or
Right.
or who was on whose side, and if something happened was a betrayal or something that happened they didn't know about. There's a lot of stuff like that that you just sort of had to piece together for your own. Which, again, it's not exactly a criticism, but I do feel like, I don't know, the way the narrative bounces around is, I
Were
feel like it could be done a little better.
were those two guys the same ones that were, the henchmen that worked for Janeway? There was one point when they met up that I think that Babe recognized them from that altercation
Okay.
in the park or woods, wherever that was, that they were mugged.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So they were on top of the brother even before Doc was dead. Concerned because that's why Doc came. He sent him a letter and said that he told him the story about the mugging.
Yes. Yeah. That's why he
So
came.
that's when Doc showed up like days later, soon after he got that. He's like, "Oh, you still have that gun?" I guess his dad's gun. And look, apparently the father was also one of this same group of people. Like, even though he was kind of painted as a communist, right? And then he was an alcoholic and then committed suicide is kind of the way the story was written. But, at the end, he said, your brother was a coward, you're a coward, your father was a coward, so like, and then even when Janeway first shows up after Doc's killed, he says, well, your father's so-and-so, like he's a name, like, well, of course, he's your dad's a badass or something is basically kind of what he was saying, or what I interpreted it as.
Yeah, it's
Not like
confusing. Like, Zell was
not
somehow
the
involved in his father's death, which I don't
right.
really get. Because wasn't it like it was just during? It was in the 50s when there was a lot of that Red Scare
Mhm.
going on. I thought he just got accused of like spying or something, and then
And then
he
he
shot
killed.
and he killed himself. I thought that's
I
all it
mean,
was.
probably didn't actually kill himself, is what I assume. Fake
That
suicide.
okay, that somebody actually. But yeah, but like, what would Zell have to do with that? I don't get it. Because this is the 50s. This is the 50s, so even back then, Zell is a wanted war criminal.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
You know, he's not a he's not a government agent,
They're in
so
like
it's a
Argentina
bit
or
confusing.
wherever the hell they are,
Yeah,
hiding out down there.
right. Yeah, what is it? Zell really he tells that both his brother and father were weak, suggesting that Babe's father was some sort of spy like Doc.
Uh
I
huh.
guess that maybe he was a real spy, but maybe the difference is like he was a spy, but he was a spy for the good guys. But then they
Right.
turned on him and said he was a spy for the bad guy. Something like that type thing. I mean, honestly, that interests me more. I'd like to see more stuff about that. It's just backstory, but it makes me think about some parallels there, like 50s Red Scare, McCarthyism,
Right.
various blacklisting and purges, and how it ruined a lot of people's lives. And then just like a few years later, something similar but even more explosive happened over in China during the Cultural Revolution, when Mao got all the especially the young people, the students, fired up and did the Red Guard and stuff, where they were like dragging professors into the streets and having fake trials for them and then beating them to death just for being intellectuals and stuff. So I don't know. Those types of movements are really scary and fascinating
Mhm.
to me. But yeah, so
I mean,
that's one of the things that I managed to did get to watch, or that's more fresh in my mind is early in the movie when he's talking to the prof about his dissertation or whatever, and he has a
mhm.
little conversation with him about his father.
Well, he says that his father was his mentor, so he probably knows
Hmm.
a little more than he's leading on.
Yeah, he says he wasn't guilty of the charges. He says he
Huh.
wasn't guilty because one of the things is like I guess he's a little reluctant to talk about it, but the whole what he wants to do with this paper he's writing is he wants to help exonerate his father,
Right.
however that works. I don't know. I'm not sure because it's never really given any sort of we're not really told if he's discovered something or anything like that. As far as we know, it's a history paper.
Yeah, I don't think he knows much other than that he thinks his father wasn't
Like
guilty
he
and
believed in his father, which makes
right.
sense, but I don't know what he really thought he could do in the paper to necessarily. Oh, I mean, he said like the prof rightly guesses. He says, McCarthy's central to this, isn't he? And he sort of vague. He said it's central, or it's essential to this. he says, yes. Well, okay. So maybe it's just like exposing that system and how wrong it was. I don't know. That type of thing. I mean, certainly a lot of
Yeah.
innocent people did take the fall. That's for damn sure.
I forget. He initially asked him like, what is your, dissertation about or something like that. And then he says, just a fairly general term, and then, mentions
He
some
says
other
tyranny.
areas.
He says
Tyranny, that's right.
tyranny. He says tyranny and how like how it's been used in the U.S. government is what he says. And then he says such as. So he brings up a couple examples, and he goes, "Well, what
Right.
about like?" He goes, "What
Right.
about McCarthy?" And he plays coy like McCarthy, and
Right.
then he tells him, he's
Yeah.
like, "Yes, I'm aware." And he's
There's
just
a
like, "Yeah,
chapter
I
on
do."
it.
And he says there's a chapter on it, but he presses him and says like, "It's like the
Right.
whole crux, isn't it?" And he sort of gives up.
Yeah.
Babe is
I
an
mean, it's
interesting character. I don't really know what to make of him. In some ways, I relate to him. In other ways, he's annoying. I mean, it's good in a way because it makes him again sort of feel more like a human. Not just a stock movie character, but because
mhm.
he has some contradictions about him. Because I mean, he's a scholar. He comes from a family of academics, but he
Mhm.
has an interest in athletics. He pushes himself
Right.
very hard in his running. He has a very weird, interesting way of courtship with women. It seems. Then, of course, he has a weird, distant relationship with his brother, because even like the stuff he didn't know, like even if that's where he just thought his brother was some sort of wealthy, successful oil company guy, like they weren't close because they were very different in temperament. And he says like my father would be ashamed of him probably because my father was, uh, sort of like I don't know, again, sort of an intellectual, not interested in things like material wealth and gain and stuff like that. But then it gets
Right.
hinted later on, like what Zell says is that maybe his father did have some sort of toe in that world of espionage, and you know, it's never made clear. We don't know. Should we believe anything Zell says? I mean, why would we? But at the same time, it is interesting that Zell seems to know anything at all about his father, so he knows something. But then again, how well did Zell know? How well did Zell know Janie. Or yeah, Janeway.
I would
Or no,
imagine
that's not
fairly
him.
well, but
Not Janie. I meant shit.
Doc.
I meant Doc. I mean, how well did he know Doc? And you say, yeah, they probably knew each other kind of well, so he might have just told him stuff about his father, right? So who
Mhm.
knows? But I'm trying to put events together here. So after Zell kills him or fatally stabs him, so that he goes back to die in front of Babe. Uh, I guess he realizes like he's really a target now, and at the same time, it seems like Janeway is zeroing in on him, and then we find out no, Janeway actually works for him, and Janeway is
Right.
the one that brings Babe to him. So let's see here. So he does that whole "is it safe" thing, which is
Right.
apparently a really famous
Hey,
line in cinema.
hold on. Right there before you go any further. That's the line I was talking about in Gremlins 2. That I told you. I
Oh,
said, "This is the one." Can I play it real quick?
yes, please, because I can't remember it in Gremlins 2.
Bring it up real quick.
Also, I don't
This
think
is
you at the time told me it was 2. I think you just said Gremlins,
Oh, did I say
which had
Gremlins?
me
Okay, well, sorry about
which had
that.
me even more confused. Because I mean, I get Gremlins 2. Gremlins 2, we definitely would have more references. Okay, let's see.
Let's see. Let me know if you can't hear audio on this. Let's
Mhm.
see. And this is just a quick clip here. Shouldn't have any problems with copyright, hopefully.
Yeah, here. Ah, yeah. There you go.
So
Yeah, I don't remember that scene, but there you go. It wasn't
that's
too long ago I saw Gremlins 2.
I
A
was
very
like,
underrated
yeah, I've
sequel, by
seen
the
it
way.
so many times, and until I saw Marathon Man, probably 8 years ago or so, I was like, oh, that's where that's from.
Yeah.
'Cause
So
it's
it's
such an
apparently
odd thing to say. Yeah.
yeah, it's a very it's funny because usually I'm aware of famous lines.
Mhm.
Like when I found out that was famous,
Right.
I was like, "Oh, like I don't remember hearing it or anywhere." But
I
yeah.
feel like it's probably been in other parody movies too.
Yeah. Torture scenes like that are confusing because there's no like right answer. Like he can say yes, it's safe, or I don't know what you're talking about, or no, it's not safe, and
What do
it
you want me
doesn't
to say?
matter. Like what
What
do
do
you
you
want me
want to
to
hear?
say?
Right.
Which in a way is realistic. It's one of the reasons why like some people need to be explained to them that in real life, torture is not very useful for extracting information. It rarely gets you what you want because often most people under torture are not like trained or anything. Even if they are like soldiers or whatever, like most people are not trained. Very few people are trained to resist torture, and like so most of them are just going to revert to I'll tell you whatever I think you want to hear,
Right. Exactly.
which isn't always helpful. So people act like torture's a surefire way, like it's a dirty thing, but if you really had to do it, do it, but it's not surefire.
I think in movies usually they torture and get what they want. So
A lot of this way it's kind of realistic in this scene because it's just like he's going to do it no matter what, and he's going to say whatever he wants him to say, and there's nothing that can be really gotten out of him. And I get it, it's sort of an establishing moment for how ruthless our villain is in a way.
I think they cut a lot of that out too. That was one of the other things that they cut out of it was a lot of that the torture scene, which I'm fine with that. I don't want to need to see more of that. I get the gist.
I get the gist. He drills right into the tooth and everything.
Right. He's got that dead tooth the rest of the movie.
Right. So this is a small nitpick. So of course, eventually, when Zell has to go after the diamonds himself, and he goes down into the diamond district to get appraisals, right? Because he needs to figure out how much it's worth and what he's got. And it being the diamond district, there are a lot of Jewish people there, right?
Right.
So eventually, there are a couple Jewish people that actually recognize him from the Holocaust. Now, I in no way would want to make light of somebody's experiences there or anything like that. This is a real thing that really happened. But the woman, I have to say, I wish she could have I get it. It must be extraordinarily traumatic decades later to see this man who was one of the important people at like this horror show that you went through. But I have to say, you wish that maybe she could have collected herself a bit better because, she's following him and yelling at him through the streets, but nothing she says is helpful. She can't think to say something like war criminal or Nazi.
Yeah.
Those are simple words. War criminal, Nazi. You can't just babble like in like German or
it's him.
I can't remember.
It's him.
And don't use his nickname. Like, imagine you're walking down the street and suddenly you see some old woman or something with like an Eastern European accent. She's like, "It's the butcher of Krakow." You'd be like, "What?" You'd be like, "Huh?" Like because like what's she calling, like the White Angel or something like that? Isn't it?
Yeah, whatever the hell it was.
Yeah, it's like I get why it's like a triggering moment. Like this is a real life monster from your life, and you're not thinking clearly, and you're super emotional. But get it together and say something useful. Don't just scream out like weird, vague things that people aren't going to understand. Like we said, war criminal, Nazi. Like people would get that. Like I don't know. If I heard that on the street, I might actually at least try to do something.
I mean, you're in the streets of New York. I mean, shit, you got to say something pretty hardcore for people to turn around,
Right, yeah. Which is illustrated a few times in the movie. For instance, in the opening, when you have Zell's brother with the confrontation of that Jewish guy, they're screaming at each other and everything like that, and everyone's just sort of like,
Right.
And it's funny too, not that it matters or to point out who's right or wrong, but it is sort of funny that like, okay, we have Zell's brother, who's not a Nazi, but he's might as well be one. He's the brother of a famous Nazi. He's certainly a Nazi sympathizer. Because when he figures out, because I mean, the Jewish guy is kind of wrong for yelling at him in the first place. It's not his fault the car has stalled. The car has stalled. It's not his fault, right? So he's yelling at him, and the German guy doesn't even seem that annoyed by it. It's not until like he starts saying like Hebrew stuff that he's just like Juden, right? So that triggers him. Here comes the Nazi shit. Oh, it's a Jew yelling at me? Okay, it's on.
And then they're yelling at each other in German, which is pretty funny in the streets of New York.
So they're yelling. So now they're yelling like racial slurs at each other back and forth, which at this point you understand. You understand each point of view. He's basically a Nazi, so he hates Jews. He's a Jew, so obviously most people are going to hate a Nazi, and of course, especially a Jew. But then what's especially interesting is after he drives away, like he's done with it. But the Jewish guy just can't let it go. And again, I get it sort of because it's like I've met a real bona fide Nazi or the closest thing to it. And this guy's yelling anti-Semitic things at me. So I get it to a certain extent. But I mean, really, if he was calm, it could have just been the end of it. But he wasn't.
Wait,
he pursues him through the street.
Did this guy think you were Jewish? Why was he yelling at you? I mean, why was he
What?
yelling anti-Semitic things at you?
Wait,
Oh,
who?
you're talking about the guy in this movie. Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that the Nazi you met in real life was not yelling at you. Okay, sorry, I misunderstood.
Oh, I don't remember meeting it. Did I say I met a Nazi? Because I didn't
I thought you
do
said you
that.
had met a Nazi in real life. Did you not say that? Okay,
No,
sorry.
no.
Never mind.
I was
Disregard.
saying that I was saying this guy's not a real Nazi, but he's as close. He might as well be because he wasn't
Ah,
maybe a Nazi of Israel. But anyway, what I was saying is like, so I get why he doesn't really want to let it go, but I mean, he really should have because now he's driving through the streets of New York, rear-ending this guy and putting all these like they are the only ones who wind up dying, so he kills himself too.
right.
But I mean, he puts all these other people at risk. So I mean, I get it, and I'm not going to be like finger wagging. And the movie is what it is. It's realistic. It's not about people. Yeah. I said I met a Nazi.
I'm not crazy. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Maybe if I said I met a Nazi, I was speaking within the context of the
Okay,
Jewish
right,
guy.
right,
I
right.
think maybe that's what I meant. I think I was saying like putting myself in the context of being
Gotcha.
that character. Because yeah, I didn't meet a Nazi. No. I mean, it's possible I've met. Well, I mean, there's different ways to define Nazis now too, right?
I thought you said
One
you
of
met a Nazi and he was yelling anti-Semitic things at you, and I was like, well, why was he
yeah,
doing that?
no, no, yeah. So when I was saying I guess I was speaking like
Right.
from the perspective of yeah, that's what I mean. So instead of using the second person, I guess I was using
Gotcha.
the first.
I don't know if I've cut out or he's cut out. Well, we seem to be having technical difficulties. One second, guys. Stand by. I apologize. We will get back to the discussion as soon as possible. He'll be back. So, and something I was going to say if I can remember what it was. Oh, it was about the fact that Dustin Hoffman is not like the stereotypical like leading man protagonist around that period of time. Cole had mentioned that earlier that he was kind of I mean, it's kind of more realistic that this guy's going to be all flawed and just weird and he didn't know how to use a gun and stuff like that, which is, more realistic than, you're not always going to be Tom Cruise when you show up. What's up, Jess? Sorry, I think Cole cut out for a second there. He'll be back shortly, hopefully. But yeah, I always enjoyed this film. I watched it when I was going through like a Dustin Hoffman phase for some reason. I really got into Dustin Hoffman movies, and I was just like going through his filmography around that period of time. So I saw Midnight Cowboy, of course, The Graduate, and then this movie. And I really liked Dustin Hoffman. I don't know why he wasn't more popular in the long run because, I mean, he took this role from Pacino. I think Pacino wanted to play this role, and he got it over him. So that's always good. And he's shorter than Pacino. So sorry,
This
just
is the
trying
kind
to.
of day I've been having. I'm not at all surprised it happened. I've had a hell of a day today, so
I didn't
just
want to
been
jinx this earlier, but yeah, it's been pretty good.
yeah,
On my end at least.
yeah, shit. No, that's not even StreamYard. That's something unrelated. That's me. I don't. It happened the last few days. I have to get something fixed because I've been getting disconnected just from everything, not just this. So that sucks. But what were we saying? Dustin Hoffman's short?
No, yeah, I was just filling time. You were talking about the altercation between the Nazi and the Jew, and they both got blown up at the beginning.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if we were finished on that or not.
Yeah,
Pretty
more or
much. I
less.
think you were talking
Actually.
about the brother at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say I didn't really have more of a point then. It's just sort of. I mean, that's the point. It is like just the way things kick off is from like a weird case of road rage, but it's road
Mhm.
rage that's like fueled by like almost actual Nazi stuff. So you can, like I said, you can say that the Jewish guy was acting like really crazy and irresponsible, and he shouldn't do that. But at the same time, you understand why he's so wound up
Sure.
because of who he's dealing with. That's the
Sure.
only point I was really trying to make. But anyway, but yeah, I mean
That
that kicks off the events of the movie and brings our characters together.
the scene when he is in the Diamond District, that's probably my favorite scene in the whole movie after everyone else is dead except for Babe and Zell. Because he goes into one jewelry store, diamond, whatever you call it, diamond retailer or whatever,
Yeah,
and they want to give him a price, and he gets pissed off and leaves. Goes to another one. He's talking with one of the guys that works there, and then the other one recognizes him.
that's where the woman recognizes him. Yeah.
Yeah, but right before that, yeah, right
Oh, okay.
after that, the woman recognizes him. But
Yeah,
the guy the guy working there was obviously was a concentration camp survivor because he has
he has the tattoo.
uh,
Yeah,
tattoo, yeah, and
and
he's
he
like, I
follows him.
know
He
you.
follows him out. Yeah, he follows him.
Hmm. Oh, is that the one that he kills?
Yeah, he kills that guy.
Okay, I didn't realize it was the same guy. Okay,
Yeah, the guy follows him, and yeah, that's the one he kills with his secret hidden knife thing.
see,
And he
see,
does
that's
it
a
pretty
thing that
smooth.
I
He
think
does it
all
pretty smoothly, right? You know, he calls people like, "Help,
right,
help! This guy's hurt," and then he just sort of wanders away. And the woman we were saying that was, chasing him down the street, yelling all the wrong things. She eventually gets hit by a car. She's so
right,
distracted by
right,
what's going
right.
on, right? It's like, oh god. So yeah, we were talking about like the indifference of the people of New York. Well, now they got something to look at. You
Yeah,
know,
we got oh shit, what was I gonna say?
at
Oh
least
yeah,
she's
I was
not
gonna say
fatally
that's
hit. She's not hit too hard, so she's not killed. But
that.
it still
I
can't be
mean,
good for
that's
a woman that old to get hit by a car.
like an older person can get away with that kind of stuff because he slits his uh, neck really quickly and then puts his knife away. And he's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, this man needs assistance," and no one's gonna think this old guy just killed this other old guy. But
right.
um,
I
you were
probably
talking
wouldn't
about
either.
before, like him being recognized. Like, I mean, obviously, I wasn't in a concentration camp, but I mean, hell, I don't know if I'd recognize a person that many years later because to me, he's just like a generic old guy, generic old white
Yeah,
guy to me. But
and especially since he was known for having like long hair, because that's one of the things. Before he comes to America, he cuts his hair,
mhm.
and apparently he was sort of known for his distinctive hair. But I mean, I don't want to argue because I'm sure there. But we've seen several. It's in certain movies and TV shows where you'll have like an older person recognizing somebody and say they're like, "I'll never forget that face." And I mean, who am I to tell them they're wrong? I mean, under those circumstances, maybe you wouldn't. Like, I'm bad with
Sure.
faces in general, but I have not been through anything remotely like that. So maybe you would
Right.
remember the face. Like I recently watched The Good Liar, which I mean, not to put stuff away, but it does have like a former Nazi in it, or somebody who was at least tied to the Nazis in it. And anyway, it's a pretty good movie. It's worth a watch. Anyway, it's got Ian McKellen is the guy. He's at first like I don't want to give stuff away, but at first he's basically this sort of like con man that like trap
Oh yeah.
fools people out of money. But then there's more to the story revealed, including somebody that hadn't seen him in like 60 years and that recognizes him anyway. You know,
Yeah, I
this
saw this
person
in the
saw
theater
him.
when it came out. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, it's a pretty good movie. It's Helen Mirren, isn't it?
Mhm.
So it's like a rare movie with like older leads, but I mean, it makes
And
sense for the story.
me, yeah, McKellen, Ian McKellen, Sir Ian McKellen, isn't that right?
Yeah, Sir Nicole.
Okay.
So it's funny because it's only been a few weeks, but I've already sort of forgotten what because as often happens, watching this movie rekindled me, checking out various Nazi related things again. For instance, I reread the Stephen King story Apt Pupil, which is very good. The movie's pretty good, but it can't really touch the story, which is even darker and more complicated. Although it's not a bad movie though. But I'm trying to think. So I remember I was looking up some other stuff, and it was the first time. And it's not like I'm numb to this or I don't care, but I don't know if it was the mood I was in, but I eventually just had to stop because I was so like upset. I don't remember what I was reading at the time. And I mean, my whole life, I mean, just like a lot of people, you have your fascination with these things, fascination with serial killers. You read about the horrible things they did. And it's not like you're numb to it and you don't care. But I mean, we get through it because people have coping devices. Otherwise, if we didn't, nobody in the world could function. You'd be thinking about terrible things happening in the world, and you'd just be paralyzed by it. So it doesn't make you cold and indifferent that you don't break down and cry, even though you know that there's suffering in the world. Because I mean, people have to live their lives. We need empathy. We need to care. We need to help. But anyway, I can't remember what it was. What I was reading about. I think I was looking up some stuff about that woman. I can't remember her name, but she's one of the most famous women from the Nazi concentration camps. And the thing about how it had never been proven, but like allegedly she had made like a few lamps, like lampshades out of human skin.
Wow. Yeah, I was actually very tempted to watch The Boys of Brazil today after this movie, but I didn't
That's
want
the one
it
I
to,
really want to watch.
yeah, I didn't want it to mess
I,
up any of my memories of this film,
yeah,
is why I didn't do it.
because that's one I'm really interested in too. And again, have never seen. Like it's kind of similar to this movie. I always was aware of it. I knew what it was, and yeah,
Gregory
I'd
Peck,
really like
is that who's in that? I want to say Gregory
Sounds
Peck.
right. Sounds right.
He's playing whichever officer that was that went down to, I guess, Brazil.
Yeah. It's from Brazil, actually. I would say in, but it's from Brazil.
Oh, boy,
Laurence Olivier's in that too.
Oh, wow.
And actually, I thought it was older than this movie. It's not. It's 2 years later.
That's interesting.
But you're right. It is Gregory Peck. But besides Gregory Peck, the other main person is Laurence Olivier. Maybe he's a good guy in that. I don't know. But I mean,
that's kind of more factual based, I think, than this film.
Yeah, because I mean, because Peck plays Mengele, who we all know, Dr. Joseph Mengele is a real guy, one of the most prominent, and he's the one that had the Angel of Death nickname, by the way. But I mean, he was like one of the main architects of Auschwitz, and that was one of the things that was disturbing about him was like they did not get him after the war. He got away, and he did go to Buenos Aires and Paraguay and Brazil and made his way through. It took a long time for them to catch him.
Yeah, I can imagine. In that area of South America, it's so many countries that don't communicate with each other. So that's kind of how serial killers were able to do it around there too. Just hop around, a few different countries.
Yeah.
Because they're not like talking to each other with, we had this many, children killed last year or whatever.
Yeah, because I don't know, not having seen the movie, I don't know how much they go into detail about like the network that was set up during the war to send Nazis there, because that's disturbing too. Because like because that was mostly done by the Catholic Church. Like high up people in the Catholic Church were among the people that set up this thing. There were various Nazis during the war that I don't know if they thought they were going to lose the war, but they figured they needed some sort of escape. So they, as early as like maybe 42, maybe even earlier, they started making arrangements, and it was mostly through the Catholic Church because they had connections in South America to set up this whole network to get Nazis out, which is disturbing.
So they kind of saw the writing on the wall beforehand.
Yeah, either that or they were just particularly paranoid, maybe a mixture of both. What's disturbing is like in the last few years, like I hadn't looked into it too much, is like finding out how many like Nazi war criminals managed to live comfortably here in Canada for a while. I remember about 7 or 8 years ago, it was a pretty high profile thing. This guy, he was like 93 or 94, and he was like in Ottawa or something. And he'd lived in Ottawa for like 30 years, and they only now finally came out like that he'd been this Nazi. And
yeah, I've heard a few stories like that.
Catching Nazis now or in the last few years, it's, as they always point out, it's important, but I mean, they got away with it. You don't like to think about that. I remember, again, from a few years ago, there was this woman they caught, and now she was not a high up Nazi. She was basically some sort of like receptionist, because she would have been really young. She was like 21 or something like that. But the thing that was annoying about her was like while she was not like a decision maker, she wasn't sending people to the gas chambers, she wasn't torturing people or beating people. Like she seemed to totally agree with it all, because she seemed pretty unrepentant. because she basically said like it was her job and she did her job well and she's proud of her job. Like she doesn't say anything like, a lot of them, their main thing is to shift responsibility around and push it so it's always somebody else's and things like that. So the other thing I watched recently, because it's been on the Netflix, is the Eichmann trial one. And that's what he does. He spends his whole time just sort of shifting blame around and even saying like, oh no, like I didn't even want to be there. I asked them to, let me go do something else, but they said I had to. And is it in this one? I can't even remember. It might even, because now I'm mixing up. I don't. Yeah, it is this one. Don't they mention Eichmann in this? Isn't that where I might be mixing stuff up? Because there's one where one of the characters says something, and he said, they're like, they found Eichmann. He was a harmless old man. He wasn't even political, and they hanged him. Is that from this movie? See, I've seen too much of this stuff recently, so it might have been from a different movie. But somebody made that comment about how, and that is what happened. Wait, I don't hear you. Are you muted?
I'm muted.
Yeah, there we go.
So I was like, most of these guys would be over 100 by now, right? Like, I mean, most of the higher up officials. I mean, if you were,
Oh yeah, anybody left would have been like 2021, pretty much.
and that probably wouldn't be an officer at that age, I wouldn't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's one of the reasons why some of the stuff from like the 70s are so prominent. Like, speaking, and this is fictional, but speaking of Apt Pupil, the movie Apt Pupil came out in 1998, and it's just contemporary. It's basically set in 1998. So you've got Ian McKellen playing the guy. So I mean, 1998, that would have made World War II over 60 years before that. So
that's believable, I think.
Right, the original story is set in the mid 70s.
No.
And I think it works a little better because even in the 70s, that character, the Nazi, he's quite an old man. But it makes sense because he wasn't like a kid during the war. He was an important guy. He was like 40,
Right.
So that's one of the things that changes a bit in the movie. Like they make it seem like he was this really important guy, but I'm thinking, well, if he was, like, I don't even know if he was 30 at the time. Not that you couldn't have like a higher rank, but usually. So that's one of the things.
Ian McKellen,
unlike the movie. Yeah, Ian McKellen. I mean, that's one of the reasons the movie's worth watching. Is Ian McKellen's really good in it, but the movie's quite toned down. I highly recommend the story. As Jay and I both said, I think a lot of people have read Stephen King, but maybe they haven't read Different Seasons. Like, Different Seasons is just so good. Obviously,
I like all those.
Those are all good. I mean, and the other two are very famous as movies. In fact, they're both cases where I think the movies are superior. Like, I think Apt Pupil the story is better than Apt Pupil the movie, which is par for the course. But actually, I think that the movie Stand By Me is better than The Body, although obviously you need it. And I think that the movie Shawshank Redemption is better than the original story.
So the only one they haven't made into a movie is the one with the doctor and the pregnant lady.
I never remember its title. It's got kind of an odd title. I can't remember. But anyway, Different Seasons is awesome. It's really good. And it's a good example too of Stephen King not doing his normal shtick of like supernatural horror. They're different kinds of stories. But so through early in July, having watched this movie for the first time, it did put me on a kick watching various Nazi-related things, and actually burned me out pretty quick. I don't know. I must have come across something that really hit me. Not the, I don't know. The Eichmann trial documentary is kind of hard to watch on Netflix because it's a French movie, which is fine. But the problem is it's a French movie, but it often, has characters speaking German and Hebrew and stuff. So you get a French voiceover over it. So, I mean, that would be fine too. But I'm getting if it would just let me listen to the French, but it doesn't because then I'm getting English subtitles. It's a bit much. You're hearing somebody speak another language, and a French person is talking over them in French, and then you have to sort out the subtitles that aren't always there. So it's a bit difficult.
Oh wow!
I'd just be happy if you're just watching it in French. I don't know, but anyway, it's still a good watch. Eichmann was sort of the example of sort of the more bureaucratic sort of Nazi. Like he wasn't a fanatic necessarily. It wasn't like we will never really know his actual thoughts, and we don't know how much lying he did. He definitely lied about some stuff, but
Right.
unlike some of the Nazis where you actually have better footage of it, you don't necessarily have anything where Eichmann was fanatical or thought the Jews were a plague or any of this stuff. It was just more like that was his job, so he did it. Like obviously he didn't care about the Jews, he didn't feel sorry for them or anything like that.
Right.
But I mean, it's one of the things that chilled people was that he could do such awful things without necessarily having fanatical hatred behind it, and that's one of the scarier things about the Holocaust. There was a lot of fanatical hatred, but then there were also other people that were just sort of numb to it and just did it, and they were like, "Well, that's what we're supposed to do, so we're doing it."
Well, it's like that famous experiment where they make you think that they're basically telling people what to do, and they keep shocking them up until certain levels, and as long as they're told to do it, they keep doing it. I forget the name of it. It's a very famous experiment, but
yeah, I remember.
Kind of
Plus
like
the other thing, like they did, just like when they did the Stanford prison experiment too, right? It's like what happens once you give some people total authority over other people can really bring out a terrible sadistic side to somebody.
It's how they totally swap. They fell into their positions. The subservient, and then they totally fell into their guard position, wanting to beat the shit out of everybody.
Yeah,
that's an interesting one too.
So I won't be watching or reading any Nazi stuff for a while. I think one of the things that kind of bothered me too, besides the real life of it, was like how also in the 70s at the same time, like it was the age of the exploitation movies. Like it's kind of sickening how like Nazi stuff became a subgenre of that. Like Jesus, like I don't know. We had to tie in one of the worst things that actually happened in real life into this sleazy thing, and
and a lot of slavery stuff that came out around then too. Slavery exploitation.
I mean, I don't judge people that watch like torture porn type thing. If they get a thing out of it, I'll watch some of it, stuff like that. But then like tying it into something like Nazi stuff is kind of because that was the other thing, like about that woman I talked about with the skin. Like she was like the main inspiration for the first really big one, which was actually a Canadian movie, which is I don't know, but it's one of those like SS women type thing, because apparently she was everything that they say in like an exploitation movie. Like she was sadistic and she had like crazy like sexual appetites, and she did weird sexual things to the prisoners and made them do stuff to each other. Like she was really like that. I better look up her name because it's gonna drive me nuts.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it too. Ooh. Two notable instances.
Because she also gets mentioned in Apt Pupil. At one point the kid asks him about her.
Is it Ilsa Koch?
Yeah. As soon as she said, I know. K-O-C-H.
Carl Otto Koch was her husband.
Yeah, so the funny thing about her is that, she was executed. She wasn't executed by the Allies. The Nazis did it themselves because she and her husband like stole from them.
Yeah. And they're bidding us to it.
Or maybe I'm mixing her up with somebody else. Okay.
No, yeah. I believe you're right. Yeah.
No, she lived later, so I must be mixing her up with somebody. There's some other woman, because she actually kills herself in a women's prison. Okay. Is what it is. But shit, yeah. So I did eventually find some other woman that like it's not her, but she wasn't quite as famous. But there was a woman. She and her husband were both actually executed by the Nazis because they were stealing from them. Yeah.
She's hot.
And what's funny is even though that's what she looked like, because of her legend and because of what she did, like it became like, I don't know. I mean, it's not like photos weren't available, but they're in like legend of it and people talking about it. It built up this image that she was actually really attractive. When
really?
She was, she was a fat, dumpy looking thing. But like when people would talk about it and things like that, they would often they would talk about this like tall, blonde, stacked woman, which obviously she wasn't.
She was known as the bitch of Buchenwald.
Buchenwald, yeah. Okay, see, wait a sec. Maybe I am. Let's see. When was he executed? Maybe he was executed by the Germans, and she went imprisoned by other people. 'Cause, yeah, that's war crimes. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, Carl was executed.
Yeah, but who was he executed by? That's what I need to know.
Firing squad.
The Koches
One.
were arrested in 1943. A charge of incitement to murder was lodged. Blah blah blah. Which had
I think the Germans
embezzlement.
killed him.
Yeah, so I got it half right. The Germans arrested both of them and killed him, but eventually she got out, and then she was, after the war, she was arrested by the Allies, and she died. She killed herself in a thing. So, so yeah, the Nazis themselves killed her husband because of embezzlement, because both of them were skimming. Because the Nazis stole all the stuff they took from the Jews they were killing. Like they were skimming stuff off the top for themselves, and they got caught.
Make all the skin lamps you want. Don't take our money.
Yeah. Like, what a shock. I can't believe they were dishonest.
They're such stand-up people.
But yeah, anyway. Oh, and I read the book The Reader. That was the other thing. Which has some stuff tied into it, too. So in July, or the first half, it's funny because it already feels far away. But yeah, after watching this, the first half of July, like I was reading stuff on Wikipedia. I read some stuff. I watched a couple things. And yeah, I'm pretty burnt out on it now. But this movie, obviously, it only briefly touches on the things. Like, there's no flashbacks or anything like that. But, you hear that this guy was a Nazi, and then you have the part where the woman and the people recognize him, and they point him out as, some very infamous, even amongst Nazis, like an infamous guy.
Mm.
But yeah, I do want to see Boys from Brazil, but I think it'll have to wait since I'm a little burnt out on this kind of stuff.
I always thought that was like some sort of gay pornography or something. That's why I never bothered to watch it.
It was a lot like this movie in that I knew what it was, but I just never actually had an opportunity really to see it. But I mean, it's an interesting movie for Dustin Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about him being short, which of course he is, and I mean, we talked about this way back years ago in the episode for not Midnight Cowboy, the other one, the Graduate. Was that when Hollywood was changing, one of the things that was happening was becoming more ethnic. It was because Hollywood of like the classic era right up to the 50s was very white bread. It was all waspy people, no matter who they were playing. We joke about that too. It didn't matter what the roles were. It was some wasp, a person with like a mid-Atlantic accent. But actually, I do a pretty good explanation of the mid-Atlantic accent on that episode if anybody's interested in The Graduate. But anyway, because Mrs. Robinson herself, the character, she has one. But anyway, we were saying like how finally in the 60s we were finally getting some more ethnic diversity, and somebody like Hoffman was part of that wave, being a Jewish guy, and also he wasn't the typical leading man. He was shorter, he wasn't classically handsome, but he was a good actor, and he could. And it was discovered, he could carry a movie. He could be the main guy, and he is quite good in this. As I said, his character is definitely complex because sometimes I don't really understand him, but
yeah, I was only mentioning that he was short because he beat out Al Pacino for this role, and Al Pacino was kind of known as being too short to be a leading man at that time. That was kind of
even Al Pacino. Yeah, I was gonna say
some of the people I think involved in this movie that were doing the casting kind of did not like the fact that he was cast on The Godfather because they thought he was too short. But then they wanted to cast Dustin Hoffman, who was even shorter, which is kind of ironic.
So I mean, it was around that time that they were breaking that kind of thing down. It's like you don't necessarily have to have a tall leading man. He doesn't have to be. I know. I do think for some very specific roles, sometimes I'll complain. When they do like comic book adaptations, stuff like that. Like because the Moon Knight show. We're not going to get into it. I like Oscar Isaac, but I think he's a little small to play Moon Knight. Moon Knight's a big guy, but anyway, not a huge thing. But yeah, as far as just like these roles go, it's reflective. Not everybody's tall, and of course Tom Cruise isn't tall, and he's a huge star with a great career. Although it is true that a lot of Cruise's movies, they'll do camera tricks to make it seem like he's taller than he is, and that's fine. The one time I think it's a good thing to do it with Hoffman is actually Hook, because Hook should be fairly tall and he's not. But if you watch the movie Hook, he doesn't look short. Like they film it in such a way, I don't know, the angles and stuff like that. They do even make a thing about it. Like at one point, Robin Williams says, like, "I thought you'd be taller," and he says, "To a 10-year-old, I'm huge," which is a pretty funny line. Movie does not hold up. We talked about it before, but Dustin Hoffman is a very good Hook, despite not being necessarily. Again, I don't think Captain Hook is the tall, towering guy, but he's probably at least a bit. He'd probably be taller than Dustin Hoffman actually is. But anyway, my point is the way they shot the movie, you can't really tell. He does not look noticeably short. So one thing is, you got like Bob Hoskins as Smee. You need Hook to be taller than Smee.
Oh,
I know that much. Smee is supposed to be a short little guy. But anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna say Hoffman's probably the best thing about that movie, but I'm gonna say Bob Hoskins is, because I love Smeed in that.
Oh, he's amazing. I mean, it's just a small role. So, like, when I name like great castings, of like literary characters, that doesn't come up because it's a small role. But if we're counting small roles, he's like so good. The way he looks, the way he moves, the way he talks, it's all great. That's a great casting. Like, now he can play Mario.
Yeah, really.
Oh, fuck. Of course, we did talk about Bob Hoskins not too long ago on here because he was the main actor in the film The Long Good Friday,
ones, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's The Long Good Friday. Yeah. Oh yeah, Bob Hoskins is a great actor. I mean, if we can ever get the final dungeon up and running again, I really want us to do the Mario movie for live commentary.
I'm down whenever you guys want.
I haven't seen that movie in ages.
Oh, we did Double Dragon at one point, didn't we? Yeah, you and I did. Okay.
Yeah, just for fun.
We'd already done that when we did Double Dragon.
Not in any official capacity. We just did it. It's funny because, sometimes we pick movies that we know are bad just so we can make fun of them. But Double Dragon is so bad. Like, there were points where we didn't even have anything to say. We're just like, this is garbage. Oh, man, that fucking movie.
We've got the Iron Chef and Scott Wolf.
Yeah.
Slicing it up.
And the T-1000 guy.
Oh, he's the bad guy, right? Yeah, he's the evil dragon guy, whatever the hell his name is.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that movie's such garbage. But if you want to see us suffer, you can look back. I think it's probably on Jay's channel. I think somewhere a few years ago, we did a live commentary on it. We really suffered through it. We suffered for you. But yeah, I'd like to do like an official like final dungeon one for the Mario movie, which I have not seen in years. So I only remember parts of it. So I'd like to see it again. But anyway, trying to circle back to this movie, trying to think of some other things that stood out about it. Well, one thing, like I said, it's called Marathon Man. And at one point, his skills in running do help him. But I guess that's one thing. It's really downplay. I thought there'd be more to it. Just at one point, he gets away by running, and that's kind of it.
Right.
The way I always pictured the movie was I thought, like, the bad guy was going to, like, put him in situations where he had to run for something. And I was wrong. It's not that kind of movie. Yeah, I thought it was going to be like a race against the clock movie. I thought, like, the evil Nazi was going to, like, I don't know, capture his girlfriend or hold people hostage or set a bomb and be like, you only have this much time to blah blah blah. Dustin Hoffman will be tearing through the streets. But I want him to run with somebody should do an edit where when he is running, they take like the techno music from Run Lower Run and put it in there. And also give him bright red hair.
Apparently, like, he actually did like do a lot of running on the set to be like out of breath for scenes. When he would be out of breath in character. So he does seem like he was going for more of a method thing on the set of this, which
sure. And like I said,
think of method actors, he doesn't really come to mind. Not to
no, but he's just sort of part of that generation. Like, I don't know if he kept it up, but it seemed like everybody was doing it, like late 60s into the 70s. That was like all the rage for that generation. Some of them kept it, like De Niro. As far as I know, De Niro was always method. But
yeah, I respect the hell out of it. I mean, I think people may go overboard with it, but
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think there's a very small fraction of roles that might call for it, but I think most roles you don't need to do that. But people can do what they want.
Yeah. Like who Who was the guy that gained all the weight to play Mark David Chapman? Jared Leto.
Yeah, Jared
And
Leto.
like had a hard time losing the weight apparently, which
I mean, at least that
is
makes him
funny.
somewhat human. I feel
Sure,
kind of
but I'm
bad
just
for
saying,
Jared Leto.
like makeup and fat suits. He didn't need to do that.
Yeah. I mean, people like to hate on Jared Leto, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but I mean, you can't deny he's a talented actor. Like, go way back to when he's super young. Think of the performance he gives in Requiem for a Dream. I mean, he's brilliant in that movie, and he's really young then too.
Wow.
So I mean, he's got the chops. I mean, there's times I think he's done stupid things and gone overboard, and everybody knows about the shit he did when he played the Joker, and nobody cares about it and stuff like that. And everybody makes fun of the Morbius movie, which I have no desire to ever see.
I haven't seen it.
But the fact is, he's got ability. And I mean, he definitely was. I don't know if he still is. He was full of himself because how. Like, I never knew this. Like, so of course he was in that band 30 Seconds to Mars, which I didn't hate. They were fine. I mean, I liked some of their songs. But there was this thing where, like, it was like you could pay a lot of money, like thousands of dollars, to go to some, like, weird retreat where they were at, which seems like a really bizarre thing to do, right? Like, even if you like the band. But apparently, like, a lot of bands, they have some super hardcore fans that did do that. So this led a lot of people to say stuff like, this sounds like a goddamn cult. So then, like, supposedly to troll those people, like Jared Leto was like, yeah, it's a cult. And then he basically sort of did turn it into a cult and really acted like a crazy charismatic cult leader, including having long hair and a beard and wearing white and all this shit. So, like, at one point, is that a joke or not a joke? I mean, people are still paying thousands of dollars and doing a bunch of weird shit with your band off in a weird place. I mean, it does kind of sound like a cult, Jared. Like, maybe it started off as a joke, but I'm a little worried about where it got to. So yeah, I mean, so I can't get a beat on the guy. He's a bizarre guy, but he is a talented actor, and he is very good in that movie, the John Lennon movie. Like, he really becomes that guy.
I mean, he's good in most stuff. I think I don't really have a lot of complaints about his acting performance.
Yeah,
I mean, he actually got AIDS when he did Dallas Buyers Club. So I mean, more power to him. Actually contracting, HIV
what?
is a pretty. I'm joking.
Yeah, that's a bit of a leap. But sometimes you think he'd be willing to do it.
Yeah.
Chapter 27 is the name of that. So here's here's kind of a weird thing about Chapter 27 that I've always found sort of interesting. Is that movie, of course, has somebody as John Lennon, right? And the guy who played, and he's very good. And that guy's name is Mark Lindsay Chapman. Isn't that crazy? To the point that, like, earlier in his career, there were a few times he was up for the role, and I think Yoko Ono herself stepped in and wouldn't let him do it just because his name was similar to Mark David Chapman's. And eventually, like, she realized that was stupid. But isn't that crazy? Like, he's best known as, like, being a John Lennon lookalike, and that's his name. Similarity between his name and that of John Lennon's murderer, Mark David Chapman, prevented him in 1985 from playing Lennon in John and Yoko: A Love Story. Yoko Ono
really? Would they really care that much?
Yoko Ono cared. Yoko Ono had been deeply
give me
involved
a
in production and had herself been initially impressed with his audition and approved his casting prior to discovering his full name was Mark Lindsay Chapman. She then nixed his casting on the grounds it was bad karma, and great deal of press attention was given to his having almost gotten the role. Yeah, so his name was Mark. Yeah, wait a second. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, he did eventually get to do it, and he was very good, even though it's a small thing. But yeah, so it was Yoko Ono that stopped it. But anyway, I've always just found that interesting, that a guy that was such a good Lennon would have a name so similar to the man that killed him.
That's funny.
But I haven't seen that movie in a while, but it's pretty good. I think it's got Lindsay Lohan's in there somewhere. Whereas, as far as the Judah Friedlander is in there as the photographer that was also hanging around and he spoke to, and I'd never seen Judah Friedlander before or since in a role that's not comedic. So it was just weird to see Judah Friedlander as like a normal, straightforward person.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, You don't see that very much anymore without him having that stupid hat on.
Yeah, I think he's even clean shaven in the role, which is
Wow.
odd too, because usually he's got like quite a beard going on.
Mm-hmm. He's usually playing some stoner, or, really stupid guy with that dumb hat on.
Yeah, he's pretty good in that movie. But yeah, there's some stuff here about after shooting the film, Leto quickly went on a liquid diet. He explained, "I've been fasting ever since. I've been doing this very strange, like lemon and cayenne pepper and water fast. I didn't eat any food for 10 days straight. I think I lost 20 pounds the first 10 days. Losing the excess weight after Chapter 27 proved a challenge. It took about a year to get back to a place that felt semi-normal. I don't know if I'll ever be back to the place I was physically. I'd never do it again. It definitely gave me some problems." Yeah, we talked about this before. Like, speaking of method, yeah, like we did. Of course. Oh, my brain is going so funny.
I know what you're gonna say too.
I'm gonna say, yeah.
Christian Bale. What is it
Christian
called?
Bale.
God damn it. Anyway, you guys know the movie.
Anyway, we did that, yeah, movie where, of course, he'd lost a ridiculous amount of weight and was dangerously underweight and skinny, and like right after that, he had to do Batman, and he actually went overboard with Batman to the point where they told him to scale it back a bit because he was too bulky and muscular. Like, I can't imagine going through something like that. But yes, we did an episode on that movie, a very good movie. That title is escaping both.
The Machinist.
The Machinist, yeah, great movie.
I didn't have to look it up to remember. I actually remembered that organically.
You pulled it out.
Yeah.
Pulled it out.
Very, very rare for me, but I did.
Yeah, very cool movie. But yeah, that really separates. Like, I know that I just couldn't. That's not something I could do. I mean, weight's been a weird thing through my life anyway. It's hard enough to deal with it in a normal sense. I couldn't imagine them just saying, "All right, for this specifically lose 25 pounds. For this specifically gain 50." I was like, I can't control these things. My body does what it does. I can't.
I don't know that they asked him to get that crazy skinny for that movie. He just did it.
I don't think they did, because it would be practically
healthy,
like immoral to ask somebody to do that, right?
But I mean, just the way he was able to do that and then go do Batman at all, I mean, it's pretty impressive. Yeah. He was pretty bulked up in Batman.
Yeah, and he was even more so before that, apparently. So yeah, he went from one extreme right to the other in the span of like a year.
You want a Batman to be super fat, right? Well, here I am. He's ready to go.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's not something I can relate to. Like, being willing to put your health on the line.
I think it's definitely.
I mean, I'd rather just do. I mean, I put my health on the line. I'd rather just do like I don't know, because it's too long and drawn out. To ask me to do a crazy dangerous stunt, sure, I'll give it a shot. But no, I can't do this whole, put my body through this long agonizing process. Something quick. Maybe it'll kill me, maybe it won't, or maybe I'll break my leg. That's fine, but not not some sort of long process of gaining a ton of weight or losing a bunch of weight, or I don't know, transforming my body in some weird way. It's not. I'm not on board with that.
Mm.
But I don't have to be, and that's why we have crazy people like Jared Leto and Christian Bale to do these things for us.
And didn't
women don't seem to have to do it as much
for the Dick Cheney movie? Didn't he get really fat for that one?
Yep. But then it was probably easy for him. He was like,
that's the easy part all the time. You could, losing it again is the hard part.
Yeah. I don't like to pick on Roy Scheider, but besides Jaws, I don't enjoy him in very much. Like, I, once again, kind of like what I said when we did he's the closest thing to the lead in the movie Sorcerer, which is an okay movie, but we both sort of agreed he was kind of miscast in that movie, that maybe it should have been somebody else. I kind of feel that way again here. I have a hard time connecting him as the brother of Dustin Hoffman. It doesn't work for me. They don't seem like brothers. I don't know. I don't dislike Roy Scheider. Jaws is the only time I can ever remember like really liking him. So, like, I was fine with him
in this. Yeah, I was fine with him in this. I think he's really more of a supporting role. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I guess he's okay in this, but as I said, I have a hard time seeing them as brothers. So here's a weird thing about his character that, like, again, it's sort of snuck in there, and maybe it's more important in the novel. But apparently, his character is gay, right? And that he was in a relationship with that guy. That he was in a relationship with the other guy, the double agent,
Janeway.
Janeway. Because you have to remember at the very start, before we ever see Janeway, when he's in Paris, he's on the phone and he's saying Janie. So it's kind of a fake out because it makes we don't know who Janie is, so it sounds like he's talking to a woman, and the
Right.
way he's talking sounds like talking to a woman. He's saying, "I miss you. Get your ass over here." So it sounds to me like they're in some kind of relationship. But by the time he shows up, I think a lot of people forget that phone conversation. But to me, it seems pretty clear that maybe they were in a relationship together. Although, if that was the case, I guess Janie didn't really actually care about him. He was just more about crossing people and getting money or whatever like that. But so I don't know if that's more developed in the book or something, but it's kind of interesting because it's not something maybe you'd expect in a 70s movie, and it doesn't really play any role or anything, but it is there. So it's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do kind of gloss over that fact. I don't even think I realized that.
No, it's something that sort of came to me in a delay because, like I said, by the time he shows up and even says like his nickname is Janie or something like that, I don't think it's easy to forget about the conversation that he had on the phone and remember, oh, that was Janie he was talking to, where it really sounds like he's talking to a woman or somebody that he's because he says like, I miss you, get your ass over here. It's not really something you say to a colleague.
Mm. That's true.
Anyway, so kind of an interesting wrinkle. It doesn't really have any bearing on the plot or anything like that, but it is kind of an interesting wrinkle. And of course, there's the part where somebody's actually sent to kill him because while the other characters are getting killed, so of course he's a target. And there's that scene where the assassin tries to kill him. I don't know how to feel about that choreography. In some places, it didn't seem very good. I don't know. It's hard. There's a lot of 70s sort of scenes like that where like they're trying to blend a mixture of realism, but also it's a movie and have something to make it exciting. Something about it didn't work for me. I'm trying to play it back in my head now. The guy comes behind him with a cord. It is pretty cool that he gets his hand really messed up.
Right.
So he's fighting with a messed up hand. He like kills him by like bulldog choke, which is a bit different. You don't see that too much in movies. I'm pretty sure that's a bulldog choke, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember my chokes. Because I
I
guess
believe
if you really pull in a bulldog choke, you can snap someone's neck. That's one thing that always amazes me about submission stuff in MMA and things like that. Like to me, it just seems so dangerous to mess with the neck, and yet everybody acts like it's not a big deal. Like I don't know if I'd be comfortable with it at all. I think I'd much rather get knocked. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a fighter. I'm not gonna pretend I am, but I almost feel like I'd rather get like knocked out than choked out because I think being choked out would just be terrifying. If you get knocked out, it happens in a split second. Boom! You're on the floor. You're out. You wake up. You have a headache or whatever. But I feel like I know you can tap, but I mean, it's still kind of I don't know. I wouldn't be comfortable. It just seems like a terrifying situation. Somebody cutting off my air.
Yeah.
Really, I'm always impressed by those fighters that won't tap and they just pass out from it. I'm like, you guys are crazy.
Or just get their arm broken or something.
Yeah. Well, that is pain, right? That's not just tear. That's actual pain having like your arm snapped. Jesus.
Yeah.
But I just mean, but nobody talks about it being dangerous. Like, do you think getting choked out a whole bunch of times might have long-term effects? Like, I don't. Everybody talks about the obvious stuff. Yeah, I know. Everybody talks about the obvious stuff. You spend your time getting punched in the face all the time, taking a high kick to the head and things like that. I think it is worse, but I mean, the neck is like you're not allowed to hit the neck. That's a rule, in boxing or MMA or kickboxing. You don't hit the neck. Be pretty quick too. You chop somebody in the neck, it's like, know. It's something you should remember for self-defense. You don't even have to hit somebody hard if you can hit them in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
Because you talk to people that don't watch MMA or don't follow it, and they talk about like how brutal it is. But if you start naming
Mm-hmm.
off the rules, it shows how limited it is. Well, you can't hit somebody in the neck, you can't hit somebody in the eyes, you can't pull on somebody's mouth. There's no such thing as small joint manipulation, which means you can't bend fingers or toes. You can't hit somebody in the back of the head. You can't hit somebody in the spine. You can't hit somebody in the groin. So it's like, okay, a lot of stuff is off the table.
Yeah, I heard Bisping of all people, who I don't like, but he was having a discussion with a boxer. Who the boxer was trying to say how brutal MMA was, and he was like, "But in our fight, in our sport, the fight gets stopped. In your sport,
Yeah,
you just keep pounding on a guy's head."
that's exactly what it
Which
is too. That's one of the things. You like how many boxers have been like subjected to these long
so many.
batterings? Because I mean
Yep.
that's one of the things. Once you're in a position where you can't defend yourself, it's over. Like that's
Right.
how it works in MMA. So you don't even necessarily have to take a ton. I mean, sometimes you do take a ton of damage, but sometimes you don't have to take a lot of damage for that to happen, and the ref steps in and it's over. But yeah,
But
in
I mean,
boxing,
how
as
many?
long as you can get up and satisfy a
Right.
count, you can go get pounded on again. So yeah,
How many boxing matches have you seen where the guy gets back up, gets knocked down again, gets up, gets constantly just getting knocked down again, like head. I
yeah.
mean, it's
Even
got to be
kickboxing
terrible
doesn't
for
have
you.
that.
Yeah.
In kickboxing, 4 knockdowns in a match just means you're done, and 3 in 1 round means you're done. I didn't get to watch it, but the most recent card on the weekend, of course, had Amanda Nunes getting her title back. I think she knocked Penna down like 5 times in that fight. She knocked her
I was
down
shocked she
over
beat
and
her the
over.
first time. Yeah. I never really liked it. Was Juliana Pena, is that right?
Yeah. I
I
mean,
was never a
I was
fan.
pretty sure this. No, Penna. It was kind of a fluke. She got her to brawl with her and took her out, and Nunes wasn't going to fall for that a second time. I didn't see the fight, but
I,
it was pretty one. It was a pretty one-sided beatdown.
I didn't see it either. I haven't seen the past few cards.
It was in I've been going to bed more early, and it was in
That was the one in
Dallas. So
Texas, right? Or Dallas or
yeah,
somewhere.
it was in Dallas. Yeah, so I knew I wasn't going to see any of it. But yeah, I've watched a lot of boxing stuff recently on YouTube, and getting more of an appreciation for it. But yeah, there's some stuff about it that's just, especially the old school boxing, where you'd have like they'd fight for like 35 rounds.
Oh God. I'm going to show you this book I got. You'd appreciate this. I'll take the cover off, but the cover's kind of interesting. See if you can. It's
Art of
all like,
Modern Rock.
those like little art posters they'll put up for like festivals and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty interesting, and it's got all the different styles, like different artists. I'll just show you a few here to give you so I can find a cool one.
Oh, I recognize that one.
But yeah, a friend of mine works at a library, and he gets all these things donated to him. Like this is like the silk screen movement.
Oh yeah,
Dinosaur Junior there. Let's find
I
another
like that.
quick one to show you. Really cool. I love art stuff anyway, but the music
Yeah.
tie-ins. So I didn't get to see a
For
lot of this stuff because we didn't really have like big festivals and stuff near me. So,
mm-hmm.
but it's
But
really
yeah, I
interesting.
mean,
Really,
for a
really high
comic book
quality art.
collector, I don't have too many The Art of books. I love them. They're just really pricey. Like just today, I got my comics today. I was down at the store and was trying to think, what was it? It was new. It was an artist edition of some pretty famous comic. I can't think of what it was, and I was just like, I wanted it, but it was like $56. So I thought, no, I can't. What the hell was it?
I was trying
Artist
to see if this
edition of
thing had a
what?
price in it. I'm sure it has a price somewhere.
Oh, it was an artist edition of the Barry Windsor Smith Weapon X. So I've got the normal trade of that, but an artist edition would be great, big, because they're big like this, and they don't have the color. They really show you the pencil work and stuff. So I'd love to get that, but I can't really justify it. So I'm always looking. I mean, other stuff too, but obviously, principally comics. I look at like art of books. I have a few, but not very many because they're just really pricey.
Yeah, this is $75 US. So
Yeah, there you go.
definitely something I would never have unless it was donated. Lots of Pearl Jam art in here. There's some fish. Lots of trippy fish stuff in here. I wanted to find something else cool to show you that you actually care about.
I mean, I'm trying to think of ones that I actually know. There's ones like Velvet Underground had a few that I can think of. They were a very artsy band, so it's not surprising.
Yep, here's one right here. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. That's Velvet Elvis, whoever the hell that is.
I don't know who that is.
Show you one more, and I'll put this away and find a cool one. Well, damn it. This thing's got a ton of pages, so. This must be like different country or something. I don't even recognize any of these bands. Whatever. You get the idea. It's a lot of really cool stuff, though.
Yeah. Most of my art of books actually aren't even comic ones. They're video game ones. Like I've got a few Capcom ones, I think. Like art of Mega Man. I think a few others. Final Fantasy ones, of course.
Is it just art from the things released with the game?
Oh no, it's like even stuff that doesn't come with the game. You know, like concept art and things like that, right?
That's cool.
Yeah. Plus promotional art, lots of stuff that gets released outside of it. But yeah, so most of my art of books, yeah, they're actually video game ones. They're not comic related. But I don't own any artist editions because, as I said, they're so pricey. But there's so many good ones that I've held over the years and thought about. Most recently, that one today. But I think there was one from Born Again by Daredevil, which is my favorite Daredevil story. So that would be amazing to have. As Frank Miller. Right around, that was one of the last good things Frank Miller did. Frank Miller in the 80s and like the first half of the 90s is great, and then he just sort of loses it.
It's almost like when he gained popularity is when he kind of lost it.
It happens. I mean, it's funny because some artists, it seems like they can just plateau, and for decades they just sort of draw. It all seems the same, but then there's others that definitely have highs and lows and declines and things like that, and you wonder why that is. Like what contributed to it. Like John Byrne, he was like a master in the 80s, and then again, once you get into the 90s, it starts to slip and not so good. It's too bad he's a crazy idiot. That was disappointing to find out. He's one of like the best Marvel artists, and he's like a crazy, cantankerous old idiot. There's your wacky opinions, and
yeah, I've heard some crazy stories about him.
Yeah. Well, what was more annoying about him too is like it's not like he doesn't know, because the way he has things set up is like he won't like talk like on Twitter or anything like that. He has his own like website that he completely controls. So if you want to be like, you have to register to go in there, and whatever you say, if he doesn't like what you say, you're not getting it on there. Anything on a message board on his site, he monitors and things like that. And and obviously he won't answer certain questions and things like that. So he'll only talk on his terms, which is his right. But I'm just saying, in some cases, like he'll go out of his way to make crazy claims or criticize people, and it's just like, well, nobody can do it back to him apparently. Which is annoying. We're not going to get a thing about him, but it is kind of weird. Like I said, like even if I did like him, the way his art sort of, I don't know, leveled off and wasn't as good. You wonder why that is. This has nothing to do with any of it. Here's something I found out only randomly. So a writer artist known in the 80s for Marvel was Bill Mantlo, and he wrote all kinds of stuff. And he was actually responsible for a couple of the licensed things, lesser known than. Although he was officially the writer of the very first issue of Transformers. He didn't stay on it, but he's better known for two other toy licenses that they brought over: Micronauts and maybe it was Rom Space Knight. So that's what he's mostly known for. But I had never really wondered why like he wasn't around in the 90s. It was because in
Mhm.
1992 he was rollerblading and somebody hit him with their car and nearly killed him, and they never found out who it was. And like he was in a coma, and even after he came out of the coma, he was so brain damaged that ever since 1992, he's still alive. He's been in like an assisted care facility. Like, isn't that
Damn.
awful? Like he was always a name I knew. He wasn't like a big name or anything like that, but his name popped up. I knew him from stuff, and I just the other day I was looking up something about him, and I was like, "Holy Christ! I did not know that. That's so sad."
Wow. Yes, that explains it.
Yeah, that's his decline. Nearly getting fucking killed. Not exactly the same. I don't know. The way a lot of thrillers are structured in the 70s, I don't like as much. I'm trying to. I mean, I did like the one we did, the Day of the Jackal. I think that is pretty good. I'm not going to say there's no good thrillers in the 70s. I just feel like a lot of them have this reputation, and by the time I see them, I don't like them so much. Like, I hate to say it because I know what a classic it is, but I'm not even really that big of a fan of The French Connection. I think it's a good movie and it's well
Mhm.
shot and well acted, but there's just so many other movies I like a lot more.
I agree.
It's definitely a good, and I think probably the most overrated part of it is the car chase. Like, people rank that as one of the great car chases. I really don't think so.
I mean, I'm not
I,
a big car chase guy, so I don't really care. But
I mean,
I
I've
mean, it's well
become one.
done. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's well done, and I guess maybe it's a bit more unique than others because it's like what he's like following like trains above him or whatever. Because it's not really a car chasing a car, is it? It's a car chasing like a train or somebody moving on. Because isn't it he's
There's cars
driving
chasing
underneath
cars in
the?
there too.
Okay, there's cars
Yeah.
chasing cars. Maybe I guess I need to see it again.
See,
Yeah, I've
he
become more
does.
of a car chase person over time.
I mean, it
I'm
just
not like
becomes boring to me. It's very repetitive, and he does a lot more of the same in To Live and Die in L.A.
yeah.
There's a lot of car stuff in that one too.
That movie's got a great reputation too. That's one people love. I've seen it. I need to see it again because I don't remember it very well.
It's one of those I want to like more than I do.
Yeah, I get that.
Kind of like, I mean, I like
But
Cruising a lot. Like, I like Cruising more than that, even though they're not, similar at all. That they're gritty movies, but
right, that's Friedkin too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, but yes, getting back to his contemporary Schleicher here, I'm trying to think. Yeah, so basically it was that run. I mean, you could maybe count Far from the Madding Crowd because I know that has a bit, but then you get Midnight Cowboy, Sunday Bloody Sunday, Day of the Locust, Marathon Man.
That was pretty much his run, I think. Like, I don't think he really had a whole lot of theatrical success or success at
No,
all after that.
he did a fair amount of movies after that, but nothing that's going to jump out at you. The only one that I
Yeah,
really know is The Falcon and the Snowman, which is just
yeah.
a pretty average movie, right? It's not considered anything special. I mean, I guess it's got Robert Redford, I think, or
Sean
no, it
Penn's in that,
doesn't.
isn't he?
Yeah, no, it doesn't have Robert Redford. I got that mixed up with some other thing. Okay, but yeah, Sean Penn's in there, fairly young
I've
Sean
seen it,
Penn.
but I don't remember it.
Yeah, but yeah, that was really his run. And I haven't seen the ones in the middle. I haven't seen Sunday Bloody Sunday or The Day of the Locust, but they're both supposed to be pretty
Haven't
good.
either. Yeah, I'm gonna try to track down Day of the Locust and watch that sometime soon.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique movie from what I've heard. It's got some weird stuff in it,
Hmm.
so that sounds kind of cool. William Atherton. Atherton. Didn't I just see him in something? I mean, he's in lots of stuff. He's been around. I feel like I just saw him in something. Let me see. Am I right? No, I guess not.
Speaking of that, Willem Devane, which was in this film, or who was in this film, man, I could not place where I know that guy from, but he's done so much stuff. He's got like 100 and something credits. Or,
Oh
yeah, he's
wow.
still alive.
Let's see if I can find out. See if
126
I know.
credits. So he's just done all kinds of stuff. I guess it's just that guy that's
Yeah.
you've seen in a lot of stuff, just never like really main roles.
He reminds me a bit of Robert Culp. If you remember Robert Culp at all. he has kind of a similar look, especially in this movie. Like they're the type of guys that you would always make like play a government agent, stuff like that.
Mm.
But yeah, I definitely have seen him in other things too. But as you said, like none of these titles are jumping out at me. He's in Payback, which I am dying to
Yeah.
see. This is kind of funny. So I haven't seen Payback in years, but I remember it as, to me, I've always really liked it. It's one of the more underrated movies of the '90s. I haven't seen it in a long time. I remember liking it. So just the other day, I was in Walmart and they had one of those like crazy collections of '90s. I think it was maybe it was yeah, it was like '80s and '90s movies. There was 20 movies. It was only $20 for 20 movies, and the newest one on it was Payback. I almost bought it just for Payback, but it was just like a bunch of like movies you'd expect. Like it was like uh, now I can't think of fucking anything, but it was like Wayne's World, Indecent Proposal.
Wow, what a collection!
What? Yeah, well, let's see. Just like a bunch of really notable '90s movies. What's the fucking one? I don't like it, but it's got oh my god, it's another sexy thing like a decent surprise. I can't think of. Oh my god, Basic Instinct.
Oh, okay, that's the one I was trying to think of. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just a
You
big
don't like it
long.
because it's not a good movie. That's why you don't
Yeah,
like it.
yeah. But anyway, it's a pretty again, it's a pretty good mix of like not necessarily the best movies, but well-known movies of the era. And just right at the end, because it's the latest one, '99, was Payback, and I was like, should I buy this just for Payback?
Didn't they put out like an unrated cut of that or director's cut or something? I don't think I ever saw it, but
I'll have to look into that because I am a big fan of that movie. It's a movie that gets overlooked.
mm-hmm.
It's one of my favorite things Mel Gibson's done, and Mel Gibson's done a lot of stuff. I need to see it again because it's been a while. But that's a movie I always champion and like to point out. I think is one of the more underrated movies of the '90s and underrated movies of Mel Gibson's career. It's just a fun movie, you know. It's not nothing special or anything. I just really think it's fun, and it has some good humor in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's see. Alternate version, Straight Up, the director's cut, released in 2007.
That's got to be what I'm thinking of.
Does not include the voiceover by Porter. Longer name. I can't remember enough about the plot to say, but anyway, it seems like you're right. It seems like it's substantially different.
Mm-hmm. More gritty.
Plus, this is all back when Lucy Liu was quite young and like smoking hot.
Mm-hmm.
She still looks great. You know, that Asian heritage ages pretty well, right?
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Bai Ling's like 60.
Yeah.
And she still looks great.
Crazy
as hell, but still looks great.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Chris Christopherson's in the movie too. That's kind of cool. But yeah. Ah, Maria Bello. There's some.
Oh, there we go.
But anyway, I need to see it again because it's been fucking forever. But I like that movie. Has a cool style. I don't know. I just enjoy it. Need to see it again though. Neo noir, as they say. I'm a big fan of a lot of those '90s neo noir movies. Just that's what my live commentary was the other day about. Was I did the Replacement Killers.
Oh, Replacement Killers. Okay.
I did do Romeo Must Die also, but
that's
which
cool.
by the way has like thousands of views on YouTube. I assume it's just people looking for the movie. It's like that possibly my most viewed movie is the Romeo Must Die thing. Luckily, it doesn't have as many like hateful, mean comments as you might expect. Because you know, a lot of people get mad because they think it's the movie, and then they get mad that it's just somebody watching it and talking. But
I like when when they don't speak very good English at all.
Oh yeah, we have a few of those on this channel.
I know they're funny to me.
One guy's like bastard.
But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, we got a few of those for Dogtooth, right? We did Dogtooth, and a lot of people insulted us.
That's what made me start putting like in the description. This is not the movie. Like you're
we
not.
Never said it was the movie.
Wait, what made you think it was the movie? We've got a big thing after, you know.
But all people care about are thumbnails, right? So if we got a thumbnail of the movie, yeah, but
like an hour longer than the movie, so. You know.
Yeah, I did the Replacement Killers a couple nights ago just to do something because I hadn't been on camera for a while. When's the last time you saw that movie?
Oh, it's been a long time.
I think it holds up.
Hell,
Like,
may have been the
it's nothing
theater
special.
actually.
Again, wow. Yeah,
That Mark Wahlberg in that?
it's Chow Yun Fat.
Giant fat, but isn't there a white guy in there with him?
Not really. I mean, Michael
No?
Rooker
Okay.
kind of. Michael Rooker's the cop.
Oh, okay. I'm getting
His
it mixed up.
co-star is Mira Sorvino.
Ah, that's what that's right. I'm getting that mixed up. Still,
I
it's
hadn't
been
thought of
since the
her in
theater.
ages. Her dad died not too long ago, though, Paul
Mm,
Sorvino. So I hadn't thought of her in ages, and then her dad died.
I
But anyway,
saw that.
it's a good movie because, like, I mean, it's like basically like a knockoff. It's like a knockoff John Woo movie, more or less.
Right.
Except it has some legitimacy to it because it has Chow Yun Fat in the leading
Right.
role. I mean, it's a very similar plot to The Killer because it's like he's a hitman, but a job doesn't go right, or he decides not to do it, so now they're going to come after him. You know, it's the same kind of deal. Not nearly as good as that movie, but still good and worth watching.
That was when he was trying
It's
to
got
blow up over here in the West, right?
yeah, it's one of his first movies
Fought.
over here, so it's pretty cool if you saw it in theater. Because I don't think I saw Chow
Mhm.
Yun Fat in the theater until he was much older.
I was
But
really
I was
into
going to say,
martial arts stuff.
yeah, Danny Trejo is one of the killers in it. I don't think he has any
Oh, wow.
lines, but he's in there. But yeah, nothing special. Like the action scenes are fine. There's nothing
Yeah.
really great or memorable. They're fine though. But I mean, what sells it, I think, is it has a good style, and of course, Chow Yun Fat is awesome. And actually, as I said, Mira Sorvino's weird because she's always been around. But I was saying this while I was watching the movies. But I was like, I know her, but is this all I really know her from? And like that's the only thing I can think of. Like I know I've seen her in things, but the only thing I can actually remember really paying attention to her in is that. She's pretty good. I was saying she was one of the ones that Harvey Weinstein did not actually assault, but like came on to, and she rejected.
Oh,
And like both her and who is it? Ashley Judd. They were in like the same situation. Like he did not assault either of them, but I guess he came on to them and made certain promises and things like that. And they both like flat turned him down. And I guess he set about like destroying their careers as best as he could and blacklisting them. And I guess an example that corroborates this is that years later, Peter Jackson said that when he was doing Lord of the Rings, now obviously the role he didn't say the role, but obviously it had to be because there's not that many roles. It had to be Arwen, right? He said that like when he was, so it was obviously he was casting Arwen in the job, and that eventually went to Liv Tyler. That like both those two had come up, and like people from like the Weinstein Company had told him like lies about them, like that they were bad and that you wouldn't want to work with them and they'd fuck everything up. So he said,
how
like,
insecure must you have to be to do some shit like that? Like, you pathetic piece of shit.
yeah, just so
God,
petty, right?
so petty. Like, go buy some high price hookers or something, man. Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing?
Yeah, I don't know about Mira Sorvino, but in the case of Ashley Judd, I could really see her in that role too. Arwen, like,
Yeah,
Liv
I
Tyler's
could see
good, but I
either
can,
of them.
yeah,
I
because
could
yeah,
see Mira
even
Sorvino
if
as well.
because I can't even remember if she specifically mentioned to have dark hair. Because like if Mira Sorvino was in it and she had like lighter hair, I think that would be fine.
She was really blowing up right around the mid '90s. She was in Mighty Aphrodite, and then of course Romeo and Michelle, which she's probably most known for.
Yeah, that's what
Uh,
I had to look up.
and then
Yeah,
Mimic, and then Replacement Killer. So yeah, she was really big around that time.
yeah. So I didn't really notice this, but when I was looking for things to say, since there wasn't much to say about Replacement Killers, it said that her coming off Mimic, she'd blown her voice out because she had to do so much screaming for it, especially because they had to do reshoots to certain stuff. So her voice was like gone. And when she was doing for this movie, apparently the director, that's Anton Fuqua, by the way, it's his first ever
Oh,
um, feature length film. He'd go on to get pretty famous because he did Training Day. But anyway, like he thought it was good for the character. So not only did he like say, "Don't worry about it," like he actually made her do more screaming like during the filming just so her voice would stay raw. I couldn't really tell, but I guess it's supposed to be in there. Maybe I just don't know what her normal voice sounds like, but apparently her
Mhm.
voice is a little more it fits the character because they never show her like doing drugs or anything like that, but she has this look where she always looks sort of coked out and strung
Uh-huh.
out, which actually I don't know if I have a type, but makes me like really attracted to her in the movie. Like she's always kind of like mussed up and looks like she
Mhm.
hasn't gotten any sleep. And I don't know if she's got the chip nail polish, but she did that be the icing on the cake for me. Like there's something about that look that actually is really appealing to me. I also like that in that movie, like she and Chow Yun Fat like they go through stuff together, but there's no
Mhm.
like sex scenes or anything like that because
Right.
you don't need that. You don't need that in every fucking movie. Like at the end of the movie, it's like they bonded. They're friends. You don't always need some sort of and it's not like Chow Yun Fat wouldn't do a scene like that. That's what his early career was. Before he became this bad boy doing John Woo movies, he was a heartthrob doing all sorts of romance stuff, and he was a soap star in Hong Kong. So it's not like he was against love scenes or anything like that. But yeah, I kind of appreciate that the movie doesn't get bogged down there. They open up to each other. They have their moments. Just again, it's not a super deep movie or anything, but an enjoyable one. I just sort of spur of the moment picked it and it got the job done. But yeah, it made me think a bit about Mira Sorvino because it's like I know her and she's been around, and but yeah, that is the movie I know best for her. She's in Barcelona, by the way, which is part of that trilogy that Last Days of Disco is in. Remember we did Last Days of Disco on here? That was the third movie, like again, an unofficial thematic trilogy by that director. And the movie in the middle of that is a film called Barcelona from 1994, and she's one of the main people in that. So I still need to see that. And I actually have the first one from 1990, Metropolitan. I've got that recorded, and I've been putting off watching it for like a fucking year, so I really should watch it. But if I watch it, I need to sign Barcelona. But I'm glad we did Last Days of Disco. That's a cool movie. That's Walt Stillman, by the way, the director. But so that's interesting. She'd be fairly young in that movie, 94.
Yeah, I mean, the fuck does Harvey Weinstein come off? That's Paul Sorvino's daughter. Piece of shit.
Yeah,
I mean, she doesn't need your help.
yeah. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why, like, she didn't get in as much a vulnerable position as maybe some of the others, right? You know, she basically just, rejected him, and that was that. Whereas, that's not how it worked with some of the other people. It's the same thing. Oh, well, for different reasons. Like I said, years ago when this came out, Sarah Polley wrote an article talking about her own encounter with him, and it was and it never got really that aggressive, and it was mostly was only because, like she said, she got the vibe from him and the feeling, but it never got any further because she was basically so apathetic through the whole thing because his pressure point didn't work on her because she was thinking about giving up acting at the time because she wanted to like maybe just do directing. So when he was saying stuff about opening doors for her and getting her parts and stuff, she like was like, she didn't really care. So that was kind of like what shielded her from him. But yeah,
Mhm.
same sort of thing. I think you would say for somebody. Well, again, different reasonings, but yeah, like you said, she doesn't need somebody like her would not necessarily be uh, beholden to somebody like Weinstein
I
or
mean,
is vulnerable or whatever.
yeah, I don't know what do you say about that guy. I mean,
He's got no
again,
shame, that's for sure.
he
No
didn't
shame.
exactly. Well, nah, whatever. I won't go down that road. We've talked about it before. He's a sick piece of shit. Whatever.
Yeah. As I
Hopefully,
said,
he's in
like
prison right now.
incredibly insecure and petty and, power tripping on the things. He's like, aha, I can make these girls do what I want, type thing. Pretty scuzzy. But
You
anyway,
want
we should
you?
talk about like the climax of the movie, which sort of so we talked about, of course, he's gone to the Diamond District and he doesn't have his guys anymore because they'll kill them at the cabin. So he's
Mhm.
sort of on his own. And then, the guy that confronts him, he manages to murder him and get away. And then the woman who's chasing him gets hit by a car, but Babe catches up to him. So they have their
Mhm.
like showdown, and that's like in Central Park, I guess, right?
Where he first confronts him. Yeah, I believe
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So they have their like this, and of course, Babe has one of the guns now, from the thing. So what we got here? So it's like, so that, oh yeah, he went there because that's where the diamonds were hidden, I guess. Because he didn't actually have the diamonds yet. When he was in the diamond district asking about, like, he didn't have them yet. I think they were hidden somewhere around that area. So this is where he actually gets them. Because it's
Okay.
shortly
See,
after
I
he
must have
gets,
missed that.
yeah,
Okay.
it's shortly after he gets them that Babe finds them and holds them at gunpoint. And they go into the water treatment facility, which is in Central Park somewhere. Remember, Central Park is huge. I
Right.
haven't been in it, but I've been on the edges of it. And it is very large. But so he does that thing where it's like you can keep as many diamonds as you can swallow, and he like refuses, and then he does swallow one, but then he says he won't do any more, and then he tries to attack him with his sleeve blade, and he says that weird stuff about his father and brother.
Right.
But yeah, I guess it is a pretty famous confrontation, but again, it's not the way I pictured it when I saw it. There's nothing wrong with it or anything like that. But then he just throws the diamonds away, and Zell tries to get them and falls on his own knife, I think. So yeah, that's the other thing. It's interesting. Like Babe does not actually wind up killing him. He falls on his own blade. It's kind of different.
Right. He didn't have to.
Yeah. And then Babe just tosses the gun in the reservoir. I think it would be good is I'd have the shot go a little longer. I'd have Babe walk out, toss the gun in the reservoir, and then I'd have him run. Because why not? The movie opened with him running. Why not have him break into a run? That could be powerful. Thinking, for years it's been in development hell and moved, not really development because it's never gotten past concept, but because it keeps changing, like who has the rights to it. But again, getting back to Stephen King stories, the Stephen King story, The Long Walk, like for at least 20 some years, there's been talk of turning that into a movie, and nothing's come of it. No, it's not going anywhere. I think it would be okay, maybe. But I always thought that was sort of a powerful ending because the whole thing is you have to walk and keep that's the whole thing, right? Walk, keep walking, which doesn't sound hard, but if you have to just keep walking, or you die, it becomes very hard until there's only one guy left, and the guy that wins. And what's interesting is like as the movie ends, he's been walking the whole time, you can't stop, and he's the winner. He breaks into a run, like the book ends, and I always thought that was interesting. Like, somehow he finds the strength to run. It's interesting. It would make a pretty good movie. I mean, it's weird. It speaks to the talent of Stephen King because it's people walking and having conversations. Like, how's that a movie? How's it a book? Well, if you read it, it's quite entertaining. That's one of the. That's a Bachman one, isn't it? That's a Richard Bachman one, I think.
Not sure.
I think that's a Bachman. But speaking of hindsight and things like that, like I wish I owned some of those books, that said Richard Bachman on them and didn't have anything, Stephen King writing as Richard Bachman. Because there was a time for at least a few years where people didn't know. I mean, people did figure it out pretty quickly and everything like that. But yeah, so all the Bachman books I own, that's just Stephen. They're new. They're like post 2000 probably, and they're just Stephen King writing as Bachman, including that trunk novel Blaze, which is a little different because he says that's the first novel he ever wrote, but it didn't get published back then. He wrote it before Carrie, but it never got published until like sometime in the early 2000s after he found it and edited it and touched it up, and because he was like, he probably didn't think it was good enough, but he's Stephen King, so now the name alone sells it, right? But apparently, even though that was the first one, why he says that's a Bachman one, because if you remember, his explanation for Bachman at the time was just very simple. It was, as we all know, Stephen King is prolific as fuck and just churns out the books, is that he got to a point where like the publishers were like, we don't really like the idea of publishing a book by you, more than one book per year, because it makes it seem like maybe the quality's suffering. And Stephen King's like, fuck that, then I'll write under a different name. And that's basically all the reason there was for Richard Bachman. Like, he never said like they were different styles or he was in a different mood or trying to be different. It was just like, I had more stuff to do, so I wrote it under a different name. But he always said that.
That's interesting.
He always said that Blaze was a Richard Bachman novel. So, and he had that whole thing about how like Richard Bachman died years ago of like, I don't know, lung cancer or something like that. But he found it in his effects, the novel Blaze. It's a decent read. It's worth own it. And of course, what's worth a lot of money too is I don't know if I think it got its own release, but also the only other way to own it, and it's out of print too, is there's like a Bachman collection that has 3 or 4 together. But you know what I mean. I'm talking about the book Rage, which has been out of print for ages and is never coming back because it's interesting because it is about a school shooting, but in some ways it's not nearly as bad as real life school shootings, since the body counts are actually fairly low. But still,
Right.
I understand. Some people might say stuff like canceling and blah blah blah, but that was Stephen King's own decision. He just the book went out of print, and he said, just leave it. So I respect that. That's fine. That's not somebody stepping in and canceling it or telling him you can't do this or that. That was the thing a couple of years ago. I remember some people were freaking out about some of the older Dr. Seuss books that might have some like allegedly unintentionally racist stuff in them. People that want to jump all over, cancel culture stuff like that. We're kind of missing the point that actually that wasn't happening. They just gone out of print. Was all that it was. And I know you can renew it. It was just a decision.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, the people that are freaking out had this thing like even Dr. Seuss is under attack, and they're making it sound like they were going to libraries and bookstores and pulling it off the shelves, but that's not the case. Any that are out there and fine. It's just that they went out of print. They're not going to make new ones. They're really old ones too. They're hard to find anyway. Because I had a bunch of Dr. Seuss growing up. I don't think I had any of those ones. These were really old, like before he was even popular.
Right.
So I don't know.
It wasn't even a doctor yet.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't know. I like this movie, but I don't really get its reputation as this great plot thriller. I feel like it's a little messy. I feel like it's a little cluttered not cluttered in that there's too much going on. I mean, it's cluttered in its delivery, and it's hard to pick up on some things. And I realize some of it's on purpose. Like we said, we don't really know everything Zell says if he's telling the truth. And when it comes to stuff that Janie says, is that all the truth? We don't really know who's like how good a guy was his brother. Was he like just a piece of shit, that would work for the highest bidder, or was he actually trying to do some good? But stuff like that is left up in the air on purpose. So I'm not criticizing the movie for that, in that they're just leaving some things for you to sort of figure out or decide for yourself. That's okay. I just feel like its delivery, I don't know, could have been a little better. I don't know, more clear or something, more concise. It's hard to say.
It does leave you with a lot of questions, but I don't necessarily dislike that. I just don't know if that was intentional or not.
Yeah. And none of them are, really big burning questions, right? They're not like
Right.
massive plot holes. It's not like what happened with this. It's
Right.
not like things that leave you totally unsatisfied. So that's not real. That's not what I'm trying to say. I don't know. And sometimes I will admit, sometimes when I have trouble glomming onto a narrative, it could even just be the state I'm in. Maybe on a different day I would follow it better. I don't know. But I mean, I'm thinking back to the first time I watched the movie at the end of June, and I felt kind of the same way. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I totally get it. It was just, I don't know. It's like you say, maybe I watched it at a time when I, was really open to it. But yeah, I enjoy the film quite a bit. It's yeah, I mean, I just don't know how much of that comes down to having to edit it for length or edit it for content or whatever. Maybe there was some things in there on the, the cutting room floor that maybe would have answered some of these questions that we've asked. I don't know.
Right. I mean, it's roughly 2 hours long, which is
So,
right
I mean,
in the middle.
not a short movie already.
Not short, not long. Kind of right
Right.
in the middle. So I mean, it doesn't feel short or long. It feels like it feels.
I mean, probably a little longer for that time period. I think that was when they were switching to like the 90-minute formula around that time, wasn't it? Or
Yeah, possibly.
maybe not quite. Yeah.
Not quite that, yeah, because as we, if you go back and we talked about the New Hollywood era, one of the things that was happening as you went forward was you had some more epic lengths
Mm.
And it was really towards the end of the 70s, a few years later after that would die out. And we did the big finale on Heaven's Gate, which was 1980,
Hmm.
which really did sort of this thing to try to cut down the length as they
Hmm.
moved into the blockbuster era. You know, you
Right.
had the success of movies like Indiana Jones, E.T., Star Wars, you know, because back, you know, those were all movies that weren't particularly long, but
Yeah.
big box office hits. I think that part of this movie's reputation is the fact that Sir Laurence Olivier, you know, one of the greatest actors of the time, is in it and plays like a Nazi villain. And I mean, it's
Right.
not like he's not good in it. And in a way, maybe it is better because if you're picturing like some really, I don't know, over the top type villain performance, I mean, it's probably good that it's not that, right?
Hmm.
But I don't know. It does feel a little. It does leave a bit to be desired on my
I
part.
mean,
Maybe it's not the way he plays it, but I do kind of wish he had more screen time. But as we said before, I do think it's good that he's not introduced right away. I do appreciate the first like half hour of the movie setting things up where you're not really sure how these events and characters connect yet. I'm fine with that. Like I think that's a fine way to do things. As we said, it seems like a lot of contemporary audiences don't have the patience for that sort of thing now, but I mean, some people still do.
I mean, because of the cancer treatments and cancer in general, I think he was on a lot of painkillers, and I think his memory wasn't that great. So I think it was hard for him to remember lines. So that may be why he didn't have as much screen time as he would normally. Maybe
Mm.
one of the reasons why. But yeah, it's knowing I mean, thinking you're going to be dead soon, and then making that movie, being nominated. I mean, he didn't win, but he got nominated for best actor or
Yeah,
best supporting, whatever it was. But and then living another 13 years after that is pretty
I know.
amazing.
And still doing some movies. Speaking of which, he's
Yeah.
Wild Geese 2 in 1985, where he played a real life Nazi, Rudolf Hess.
Huh.
So he
This is
played a fictional Nazi in Marathon Nazis in The Boys from Brazil, and then he played a real life Nazi in Wild Geese 2.
yeah. He found his
So
calling
that's an
card.
interesting. Yeah, I guess his last sort of big thing was he was Zeus in the Clash of the Titans movie,
Okay.
which I don't quite remember, but
Me either.
have seen. Another one of those movies that's like gets quoted and mentioned a lot in pop culture, but it's kind of a mess of a movie, really.
Hmm.
I mean, it's supposed to be about Greek mythology, but what everybody remembers is Release the Kraken. It's like Kraken's not Greek mythology. That's like Norse mythology, people. But whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Laurence Olivier a lot, but I'm used to his more classic things. Like I've seen him in, a lot of his like Shakespeare adaptations and
Hmm.
stuff like that. He plays Darcy in the 1940 Pride and Prejudice, which is one of the more overlooked versions of that story. Like, there's quite a few movies of that, right? The 1941 doesn't get talked about a lot. I haven't seen it. I mean, speaking of another big leading man from that era of books and stuff, he's Heathcliff in the Wuthering Heights movie. Year before that, I've never seen it, but I could definitely picture him in that role at that age. The one I'm conflicted about is like he's in the 1948 Hamlet, which he also directed, and I think that's the movie everybody really thinks of when they think of like Laurence Olivier or classic Laurence Olivier. I have a lot of problems with that movie because of how much it cuts out. Like Hamlet's kind of a longish play, and I guess in the spirit of running time for the movie, they wanted to cut it down, but I think it really hurts it.
Hmm.
So it's not like he doesn't give a good performance, but I can't. I haven't seen it in years, but watching it, I just feel like I'm watching like a cut up version of Hamlet. So it's hard for me to really like it a lot.
Hmm.
But speaking of which, I mean, we'll get to it eventually. Like I've wanted to do another sort of do one or two Shakespeare adaptations. Maybe like a straight one like that, and maybe like one of the more loose ones, like they do sometimes. They were sort of a big thing in the '90s to do sort of loose modern adaptations of the story or something. So that's something I hope we eventually get around to.
Yeah, I know you've
Is
mentioned
something
that
like that.
before.
So if we can finally get some organized, we'll maybe have that coming up in the future. So as far as the immediate future goes, we don't know. Jay and I haven't actually got together in a while, so we'll have some discussions finally about
Mhm.
some of the stuff we can do in the next little while. But we can probably finish up here. I like the movie. I'm glad I finally saw it. I don't want to say I'm disappointed, but as I said, I just had, for whatever reason, all these years, I had like a different picture of it. And finally seeing it
Mhm.
was kind of weird because it turned out to be quite different from the way I imagined it. So
Mm.
I really thought the marathon thing would be more important. I really thought like Dustin Hoffman would be running around and it would have a lot more to do with the plot. And I didn't know there was going to be a subplot of him like meeting some, you know, fake German girl. Like I don't mind any of that. I just like I did not know that that was in the movie.
Mhm.
So it kind of threw me a little bit, but still a pretty cool movie. It's good to do something from the '70s again.
Mhm.
Feel like it's been a while, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's a fun, fun era.
Yeah, for sure. So John Schlesinger, Dustin Hoffman, Sir Lawrence Olivier.
Hell of a cast.
Yeah. Oh, I'll check. Speaking of cast, I'll check one more thing just because. You know anything about that actress?
I read her career was fairly short, just because I don't think she really got a lot of traction in
Right,
her
Martha
roles. But yeah,
Keller. She's Swiss in real life, so that's interesting. That was her most famous role. Um, let's see. To see if I know any of these titles. Not really. I assume she did a fair number of like European films. I'd assume that might not be too. So yeah, I don't really. She's worked right into the 2000s, into the 2010s. Wow, I mean she's in her 70s now, but she's done quite a few things in the 2010s. I don't know any of them, but there you go. I mean, some of it's TV, a few TV movies in there. So yeah, it seems like the bulk of her career in the 2000 has been TV movies. Yeah, she's done a lot of TV movies. So yeah, not too many theatrical films, but a lot of TV movies. That's sort of her bread and butter. I mean, she's all right in it, I guess. She she has a part to play. She gets killed, doesn't she? Yeah, she gets killed. Yeah, it's kind of a bleak movie, but it's that is one thing I did expect. I think it'd be fairly bleak. I'll say one more thing. Speaking of like '70s thrillers and Dustin Hoffman, one I haven't seen in ages that is really good and I think holds up really well is oh shit, I had it. Um, well, you know, what's another '70s thriller with Dustin Hoffman? They made a remake of it about 10 years ago. Uh, he and his wife move back to like her hometown. It's like a southern hick place, and they're all really you're muted.
sorry, Straw Dogs.
Straw Dogs. Straw Dogs is really quite good. I don't think there would be much to talk about to analyze, but it's a good movie that I would totally recommend. The remake's not bad. I think that's James Marsden in there. Remake's
Uh,
okay.
I don't think well, I may have seen it, but I don't remember. I think one of the Skarsgårds in there, maybe Alexander,
Yeah, it could be.
the older
Um,
one.
Stellan? Or do you
I think
mean one of
Stellan's the
Scarlett's?
dad.
Yeah. The one of the dads is James Woods. James Woods is in
No,
there.
I'm saying Stellan's the dad of the other Skarsgårds, like Bill and
Oh,
Alexander.
okay. When you meant the Skarsgårds, you meant his sons. I know
Right.
Stellan's the dad. When you said old, I just picked the old one.
Oh,
I
sorry,
know
sorry.
Stellan.
The
I know
older
Stellan's the
brother.
dad. Yeah, older brother. Yeah, I know. Yeah, Stellan's the one I know best. Like the others, I get them mixed up. But yeah, possibly. I think it's 2011. Anyway, it's okay, but the original's definitely better.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a Sam Peckinpah, right? So Pretty hardcore movie.
Yeah. Has some of his trademark violence. That's one of the, we couldn't do everything back when we did New Hollywood. So one of the things we missed out on was like the contribution of somebody like Sam Peckinpah, who really brought like a new level of like graphic stylized violence, which really had not been seen before. I mean, we did talk that, movies got more serious and have more content. But if you want to talk about violence, he was one of the big guys for that, bringing in some strong violence.
Yeah,
So,
Straw
I don't know.
Dogs is one of those I can't watch very often. It's one maybe every decade because it's a pretty disturbing movie. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
extremely like graphically violent. It's just
Yeah. The remake doesn't have quite the same punch. The remake's probably a little easier to take.
Well, it's like when they remade Last House on the Left. I mean, come on, why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe he's in that one. Maybe I'm getting it confused. Maybe
And that's a great example because you know what? I really have trouble watching Last House on the Left, but I don't have trouble watching the remake. Like it just doesn't have the oomph. It doesn't affect me really. It feels fake. It feels more fake and slick.
It's
and
polished. It's polished
Yeah,
like all these damn remakes are. I mean, that's a really gritty, like grindhouse style movie.
Yeah, and it just felt so real.
Mm.
It was why I was always appreciated the way they did the end credits, because the end credits are all nice and happy, and it almost like reminds you it's just a movie. Nobody actually got hurt. Everybody's fine.
Right.
I actually appreciate that. So yeah. It's not like I love that movie or anything, but I like respect it for what it brought and what it sort of introduced. It's not like a movie I really enjoy very much because it is so harsh. But yeah, the remake is
recently
crap.
watched Cabin Fever. The Eli Roth movie. Like really his first thing he did that was really popular.
Yeah.
And man, he apes so much stuff in that movie, and it's like, it made me ask the question, like at what point is it, a copycat? At what point is it an homage? Because it was just so much. Like I'm like, there's Night of the Living Dead, there's Texas Chainsaw. He ended with the, Last House on the Left, like you're saying, the like happy credit song over the end. Which has been done before.
I forgot that it did that. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah.
Is Ryder Strong in that movie?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. It's been a long
He's
time.
The lead.
What's he up to these days?
I don't know. Is there another Boy Meets Girl Meets Boy Meets something?
Oh, yeah, there was. Maybe he's on that. Yeah, he was somebody I really looked up to. I used to watch that show, and his friend was Sean. He was cool. I was like, he's such a cool friend. I wish I had a friend like him, or I wish I could be like him. I always thought Sean was so cool. But yeah, that show had a big influence on me because I thought Sean was
come
cool.
over he'd come over to cry and smoke cigarettes.
I was so in love with Topanga. She was so
of
beautiful.
course.
Yeah, I wonder if that's on Disney Plus. Would that be on Disney Plus?
I mean, was that Disney?
I got all excited. I had Disney Plus on the other day, and I got all excited. I was like, The Wonder Years. I've never seen The Wonder Years, and it's just some shitty like new version of it. Like, I don't want that. I want to see the actual Wonder Years.
Yeah, that's one of the probably big networks, CBS or someone. I don't think Fox did it before Fox, probably.
How dare they tease me? I was really excited. I was like, I've never actually seen this show. Like, I've seen clips and I know what it is, but I've never watched any of it. I'd like to see it. And no, it's just some new crappy version that probably only ran for one season.
Is it modern day or is it like a period piece like the original?
That's a good question. Maybe I can find it. It might be a period.
I'm just curious. Is this what
like
the
Wonder
90s?
Years was like what? Wonder Years was what, like late 80s, early 90s, right?
That's when it came out.
Was it set earlier?
50s,
but it was set earlier.
Yeah.
Wow, really? 50s?
I think so. Maybe 60s. I mean, it was definitely not in the 80s.
I think 60s is right. 50 sounds too far. Shit, now I can't find it. Something else on here I wanted to talk about, but I don't think today is the day for that, so we'll leave it. We want to finish. We want to finish off, but I do want to check this before we go. Oh, there's the dinosaurs show. Wow.
Oh wow.
That was a show we used to talk about back in the day.
That's a fun one.
Yeah. That was a show that I never really watched, but like everybody I knew watched it, so like I always heard about
Uh-huh.
it. I don't know. I couldn't really get past how stupid it looked. I'll just say one more thing since it's on here. What I'm actually currently watching on Disney Plus is Light and Magic, which is a documentary about industrial light and magic, and
Uh-huh.
it's really cool. So
Okay.
anybody like you or people that are interested in
Sure.
movies and how movies are made and effects. It's just it's the story of industrial light and magic. So it's really good. I'm
That's
up to the
cool.
5th episode. Been really enjoying that because I mean we've all seen stuff like here they are making Star Wars again, but this time like the focus
Right.
isn't like on the actors or George Lucas or anything. It's on
Mhm.
the effects people and stuff and all the okay, maybe I'll just okay, hold on. I'll just do a search for it. I don't know why. This is a really dumb thing about me, but whenever I'm on a streaming service, I'm very reluctant to use the search option. Like
Really?
even when I know like I always feel like it would be a better victory if I could just find it myself first. I don't know why I'm stubborn like that. Like
I
who
normally
cares?
have to. Their usual browsing is so shitty usually.
Oh, I know.
Like Netflix in particular.
Netflix has actually gotten worse, which is
Yeah, I
impressive
think so.
because it was never that good. And
Right.
now it's worse. Okay, The Wonder Years. Let's see what the information says here. Then we will let everybody go home.
I think they're both
Yeah,
1960s. That's what
it's
you're looking
definitely
for.
60s. I can tell by the
Yeah.
picture that it's yeah.
I think the new show is the same, set in the same
Story
period
of
of
the
time.
Williams
Just
family. It's just a different family. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Wow, 22 episodes. So maybe it did get renewed. I don't know. Anyway, I don't have anything against this show I've never seen. I'm just disappointed because I wanted to see the original
Yeah.
because that was the one I always heard so much about. It's
I'm
such a
sure it's
big part of
fine. I'm sure
yeah,
competent
I'm
people
sure it's
made
fine.
it. I'm sure it's fine, but
But I mean,
Fred
like most
Savage.
things with most things with remakes and stuff, you just can't recapture the feel.
Right.
But anyway, so that's that'll do I think for now. So that was Marathon Man 1976. For our first time back in a while, it wasn't too bad. I was worried it would be really scattered, especially on my part, because there were parts of the
Yeah.
movie I couldn't remember as well. But not too bad. Maybe not our best analysis, but certainly a good movie that I'm glad I finally got around to seeing. And it really, again, it was kind of jarring how different it was from the way I always pictured it. But I'm glad to see it.
Mhm.
Dustin Hoffman, one of the great leading men of the '70s, in a pretty cool role. So, and as I said, it kind of put me on a bit of a Nazi kick for a while. I'm kind of relieved to be off it, to tell you the truth. But that happens to a lot of us. So yeah, don't know what the next one will be, but Jay and I are going to have some talks about that so we can get a little bit organized because the summer has not gone to plan. I mean, things never really do, but we'll try to be a little more vigilant. So thanks so much, anybody that was here for the comeback, and we'll see you again soon,
Cool.
hopefully.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.
Peace. Bye bye.